Or do you think
it was
just
always
kind of
me.
born dark?
Yeah. People say I came out of nowhere to do this. I'm like, no, I came from the dark.
Yeah.
And I don't really like saying that, but it is absolutely the truth. And I'm getting more and more comfortable telling people that, like right off the bat, because they're like, oh, what got you into this? And I want to say something nice, but it's not nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not nice at all. And I've only really spoken about it maybe one other time on a podcast, and some of those things I had never said to another human being. So when you're finding out who you are, and you finally have you realize that your decision making is guiding everything. Like, you have a deep, deep power in you. And I always had a ton of energy. And for me, and I think a lot of people that are listening or that have been in the sport in general, if you don't guide that energy, if you don't harness it at some point, it's always going to lead towards destruction.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Anjie Yeo, right?
Yes.
Okay. And 18 years of training experience and 11 years coaching competitive experience. Second in Miss Olympia last 2 years.
Last 2 years in a row.
And Westside certified, work as a coach, you powerlift. You've kind of run the whole gambit here with figure, physique, powerlifting, and bodybuilding. So we're going to kind of go over your timeline, your history, lessons, and all those type of things. But what I want to start with is I heard you say this on another podcast, and I wish they would have dug down deeper into it because it's kind of profound. So the quote was, bodybuilding is how I find out who I am. Right. And so when you said that, I have all these questions that stem from that. And so what does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh, we're going to start right in the deep end, like boiling water. I mean, oh my gosh.
Let's go this way. How is that evolved? Let's go that way. So how has that evolved?
So I am not an athlete that was an athlete as a kid, continued through high school, college, and was just a good kid,
Mm-hmm.
The whole way through. Like, there's a really dark part of my adolescence that taught me a lot about life, a lot about myself and what I did and didn't want to do. And then when you come out of that, like, there is,
what do you think?
You've been stripped of everything.
So you're like 13 at that time, right?
I'm like 14 through 18.
In hindsight, have you been able to kind of like pinpoint what led to that, or do you think
it was
just
always
kind of
me?
Born dark?
Yeah. People say I came out of nowhere to do this. I'm like, no, I came from the dark.
Yeah.
And I don't really like saying that, but it is absolutely the truth. And I'm getting more and more comfortable telling people that, like right off the bat, because they're like, oh, what got you into this? And I want to say something nice, but it's not nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not nice at all. And I've only really spoken about it maybe one other time on a podcast, and some of those things I had never said to another human being. So when you're finding out who you are, and you finally have you realize that your decision making is guiding everything. Like, you have a deep, deep power in you. And I always had a ton of energy. And for me, and I think a lot of people that are listening or that have been in the sport in general, if you don't guide that energy, if you don't harness it at some point, it's always going to lead towards destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So even to this day, I have to choose whether to create or destroy, and I don't win every day.
Mm-hmm.
But
so your default when you wake up would be to destroy.
There has been what I love about these sports is the psychology. And that's good because that is some of the hardest parts to master. And that's really why I got in, like I absolutely needed to do something with my body because my body was going to carry me, you know, into very horrible unintentional circumstances because that was just my propensity for not just adrenaline, but to beat back what I felt was already inside me, that, you know, I was always really scared of myself. You know, I would have these like waking nightmares as a kid, and I could just not ever stop them. Like I knew I don't like to say disturbed, but that is the perfect word for it. You know, I would just see these horrible things all the time. And like, I knew that wasn't me. Like, I knew that like these things were bad, you know, like maybe you call them intrusive thoughts, but when you're a kid, like they scare the hell out of you. And I would just be, you know, I had horrible insomnia. I couldn't focus in school. I didn't do very well. I graduated high school, got through about 2 months of college, and then things got real bad. But back to the question, when you finally have an ability, when you've come to a point of having been through all these things, like you're either going you just have to decide, you know. And I'm like, there is so much more in me. I got out of a certain, you know, apartment, out of a certain set of friends, because I was just like, I remember it was like a sunny day, and I'm like, I'm never going back to this.
What was the catalyst for that? Because if this is going on for years...
God, you know, you're just watching people around you, and then like no one has any impetus to improve or change. Like the bar was so low, and I'm like I have something in me, like this fire, like that I just have not been able to control. There's something there. There's something there about this wildness and this ability to just and I have handled so much pain. I have, you know, I have come back from near death how many times? Like, this is powerful, you know, like I gotta respect this. I have got to find a way, you know. And I was always spiritual, you know, like my mom was deeply religious. That didn't fit with me. But after a while, she finally just, you know, let me go and seek, you know, and I was always looking for something, you know. So when I'm, you know, kind of going through these spiritual things and like discovering what it really means to honor your inner power, and like you and I both have like the same original visualization. I thought that was amazing. You said on a podcast once, like how you learned how to visualize. And I'm like, oh my God, that came straight from one of my books, and I did it the same way. This is crazy. This is wild. But yeah.
So how did bodybuilding come into the picture? Because there's that mindset, which I kind of tend to pause to say it's self-destructive because it can be constructive. You know, it's just how it's utilized and where it's being placed.
It was perfect.
You know, if it's being placed in a negative way, well, then it's going to lead to obviously negative outcomes. Yeah. Where it was a bodybuilding magazine, I think, that you said that kind of inspired you, but was that before or after your accident?
Before.
Okay, so before. So that was before the figure show.
Yes. Yeah. I got
what
into it in
caught
2006.
The attention of the magazine?
Oh gosh. You know, I didn't have any positive role models back then. And I mean, I knew a magazine was a magazine. I knew pictures were, you know,
no, but this is
edited.
So foreign to your lifestyle at the time.
You
can't get further away.
I saw power. I saw control. And that's something that I didn't have over myself. And I'm so glad that I didn't quite know what it was, but it was like, I looked, and I mean, I was so broke at the time. Like my boyfriend at the time bought it for me. Like, of course, without even thinking, he was like, of course. And I clung to that, and I poured over that. And I was so intrigued because I had never seen a body that looked like that, or a beauty or a possession, a self-possession like that. And I really had a feeling that that was going to help. I mean, whatever I was going to do had to be as strong and severe as what I had already done to get my attention.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I was going to choose, you know, in hindsight, was going to have to be hard.
So you wanted to feel like what you saw or thought they felt, the people in the magazine.
Oh, I had to find out.
Yeah.
I had to find out what it was. And of course they were healthy. They were not just disciplined in their life, but usually ran some businesses. I wasn't quite into that just yet, but you know, like getting into the spiritual stuff, like, you know, they're using nutrition as medicine, just like we have for millions of years or whatever. And, you know, they're using this food to help nourish their body, get well, get healthy, and not just do that, but more, you know? So the addition of doing the physical things, you know, that was going to also like kind of take care of like the incredible amount of energy that I had was just a perfect pairing.
So how'd the figure show come into
the
picture, right? Because if you train for that in your house.
Yes.
Like bands and push-ups, I assume. I'm not too sure what you used, but
yeah, I trained for the first 6 years out of the back room of my house. So Bowflex body.
Mm-hmm.
But like before we had those things, yeah, it was just like bare bones equipment. I don't even know. I mean, maybe we had some exercise bands, couple of dumbbells, straight bar.
So this was 6 years before your first show?
2006 was when I started.
Yeah.
2013 was when I did my first show, and I did the Toledo class Scepter.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first one.
And that's no coach that's training in a spare bedroom with a Bowflex. And
no, absolutely. Yes. Like, I mean, like I had the magazine.
So you just went by that, right?
I had I wasn't really on the internet at that time. Just kind of a little bit, like I was pretty late to the internet. But books, magazines, and just like literally self-taught, because I didn't have a single friend that was doing what I was doing. I didn't know any, I didn't, of course there was no coach, there was no training, there was no diet, there was like literally nothing.
Now was your friend group still the same as what you had?
I mostly dropped all of my friends or whatever, and I adopted everyone that my husband knew. Now we had a similar circle, when we got together, because we were kind of running the same art and music scene. So like places you used to bounce, we were at probably people DJing. And you know, so that was better. That was better because his friends were much more trustworthy, and I had just completely outgrown the people that I was around. I really, you know what I'm saying? Like,
so were they enabling the figure?
Oh gosh, nobody really had any idea what I was doing. So like, you know, the art and music scene isn't exactly connected in any way to a fitness scene. So I was completely completely by myself.
Yeah. So after say 5 years of training, why did you decide to do it? What was the catalyst there? I get the catalyst on why you started training. Yeah. That makes sense. But it's a whole nother thing to say, I'm going to step on stage, you know, in a bikini in front of everybody.
I wasn't too worried about that part.
Yeah.
That was the least of my worries. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm looking at these ladies and they all have one thing in common. And that was competition. And I'm not really competitive. But, I just to take it to the first show I attended, you know, first little show I attended, I remember looking at the trophies and the lady on stage, and the trophies and the lady on stage, and something in me, like that little voice, that huge voice, was like, which do you want? Literally, clear as day. Which do you want? And I was like, I want to know what she's feeling right now. And that was it. Like, they all had this thing in common. So I'm like, there's something to this. Also, to be honest, I almost, you know, I was much younger then. I felt like if I wanted to push this as hard as I could, to justify it to other people that had nothing in common with this circle at all, didn't really understand what I was doing, I felt like I had to put something official on it so I could just push myself, so I could diet. So I had a reason, like a time and a date, and I don't want to say an excuse, but I'm like, this is what I'm working for. This is why I'm going so deep and so hard, because I wanted to go deep and hard. That was it. And I didn't know if I could really do it without justifying it. Cause like in your mind, you're like, no one's going to understand why I'm doing this, you know, and no one ever tried to talk me out of it. But in my mind, I'm thinking that I have to have, and I mean, I thought about it for a year, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And that is when I first learned how to trust my intuition, because it was on me.
Mm-hmm.
It was trying to tell me something. And I thought about it, pushed it down. I'm like, so if anybody's like got something on their mind for over a year that they can't put away, just listen to your instincts, listen to your guts telling you something.
So how'd the first show go?
Great. I was nervous. I mean, I worked a little bit with the promoter, and he helped me a little bit with posing. My heels were way too high. And it was awesome. It was awesome. I had never looked like that in my life. And I really didn't, I mean, I kind of had an idea of what to expect, but it was a whole new adrenaline rush. And I was so proud of myself. And I was, I was so clean, like I had, really separated myself from substances. And I felt like I've never had that kind of pride.
Was that the first time that you had self-actualization?
Yeah, I thought that none of this stuff would ever work for me. Yeah. I was like, okay, stuff that's written in a magazine, or, these programs or ideas for programs, like I'm just kind of, and I trained myself. I never really did a program that was written down. I just kind of saw things, learned, and applied. So I did it all completely by myself for my first 3 shows, actually. And I won. I mean, it was a pretty stacked first show. There was like at least 16 of us, and I came home with 5 trophies that day.
So after that first show, did your will increase? Like at some point in time, you're going to go all in. So were you all in before that show, or was it after that show that it amplified?
It was.
And we're going way back, so I get that.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, these are good questions.
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is the foundation of everything. I remember getting back from that show, and I went to the promoter and I was like, Ryan Rolson. I was like, Ryan, what do I do now? And he's like, you can take this as far as you want, and I was like, okay. So I signed up for the INBA national show in Chicago. Had no idea how big of a show that was. So I was in way over my head. Ended up winning that show. I mean, traveling for a competition, like I'm traveling for a competition. Mm-hmm. You mean I'm leaving the state, I'm getting a hotel. I was broke. Mm-hmm. I had no money for this stuff, but it's like, well, maybe we can get some help. Maybe we can, there's people that have seen how far I've come with this, and they genuinely give a shit. So, I mean, I did do like some crowd fundraising, and that helped me get to, I'm not sure if that helped me get to Chicago, but when I won Chicago, literally overalls, that invited me to the Natural Olympia in California. It was like a 3-day competition at a resort. And I'm like, I can't afford this. I mean, like, there's no way, but like, I'm doing amazing. Like I could go from local to nationals to the very biggest natural bodybuilding show on earth. And I mean, I did. I got the help. I trained. I mean, I was still doing it all by myself, still from the back room of a house. So not much in the way of leg equipment. And I can remember the last like $500 dropping in that GoFundMe as I was on the plane. And I was just like, so overwhelmed by people like caring about me and like wanting to see me go and do this thing. And I'm pretty sure the news actually came to my house because they're like, oh, what gym do you train at? And I was like, well, I train from home. I can't remember if that was the first year or second year, but yeah, they came out to like interview me because I was doing this big thing and I was trying to, raise a little bit of money. And then, first year at this huge competition, and I take home 2 silver medals. It's unbelievable. It's not normal.
So going back before this started, you had heavy drug use for a long time, right? So did you, you just kick that? I mean, that's not an easy thing to work your way out of.
No.
You know, so how did you work your way out of that? Because was it just like, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore?
Oh no.
I didn't think so.
I'm very, you know, like I can be very obsessive and compulsive and impulsive. And that's gotten me in a lot of trouble. So a lot of energy that really needs a lot of containment. And that's like the psychology side that I'd really like to talk about later, is like all that mental strength to do such things. But no, there were times where we had this little stepper in the back, and I can remember being all effed up. And I'm like, I can't do these two things at once. Mm-hmm. Like, or being like hungover and being like, you know, like I really wanted to do this other thing today. You know, I'm like right at the beginning, and I'm like, I really wanted to train today, but I'm too sick to train. Like, you literally have to just stumble over these things and be like, oh, I cannot do both. I can't do both. And then, of course, part of me is like not really ready to give it up. So then it's like trying, like managing, like, you know, like maybe some on the weekends and some here. And like, eventually you just got to be like, look, I've got this goal. I have to sacrifice for this. Like, there is something out there for me. I can feel it. And if I'm allowing this stuff to get in my way, I mean, and this is months and years mm-hmm. of going over these thoughts of, you know, like temptation and relief from, you know, the depression and stress and, you know, just, you know, all this darkness. And I'm like, if I don't have this to take and I've got this darkness, how am I going to manage this darkness? Like, you know, like I know this is the potential to just fucking kill me. How strong is this? You know, like, and figuring out how to pull, you know, having people come on that talk about like having their demons work with them or getting down with their demons. Like, there is a serious process of doing that and realizing who you are, what you are, that this is not going away. This is going to be part of you until the day you die. But we need to find some kind of Zen work that's going to get through this. Because if this is that bad and that dark, there's always another side of it. And once you realize there's that other side, there's like, oh my God, there's hope. There's not just hope. There's a curiosity and like a drive, and like I can feel like my skin like picking up right now, just to be like, if it can be that bad, how high can we get over here? Because there's got to be an equal and opposite. Right. Like, there's got to be a high.
So there's two sides of this. The goal had to become stronger than the temptation, but at the same time, you had to be able to use your inner self in its fullest capacity.
Yeah.
To go towards that goal, instead of trying to change who your inner self is to become what you think needs to be for that goal. Yeah. And I think that's important, because we see that a lot, you know, in strengths. You'll see somebody that you're aspiring to be, right? And maybe they have a different demeanor. So you think you need to change your demeanor to be like them, instead of just figuring out how to use your own self to its greatest potential.
I'll tell you what, though, no matter who you see out there and like who you look up to and how good you think their life is, they are dealing with something that you don't want.
Yeah. Well, people forget that. Well, that brings up an interesting question.
I want everything about their life. I'm like,
well, you want
one thing that you might not want.
You wanted to know how they felt, right? And so the first thing that kind of went through my mind when I heard that was, oh shit, she doesn't really know. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just like fantasy. This isn't good. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like
there's a stage moment. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, be real careful when you meet your idols sometimes. You know, so it's because that will change too, right? And fortunately for yourself, you learned how to embrace yourself before getting to that point, because it is true. Whatever you see is always fiction. If it's Instagram or online, it's not a true story at all.
It's important to tell these. And I've listened to so many of the episodes over this table and hearing people talk about the darkest times in their life. And I'm like, oh, thank God, you know, like, I've been there. I know exactly what that house looked like. I know exactly what those people were doing to each other. I know what that looks like. I know what the worst of humanity looks like.
So then how do you reframe that now to your advantage? Because you can look back and be depressed or anxious or upset or guilty, or there's so many emotions that can go.
A lot of some of that bad stuff happened in Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
So, like people coming down here and like literally looking for me and trying to like get me out of the places I was at, because like not only did I not belong there, people died. Just, and you never would, it was like the worst kind of people. So it was like almost, not that lives don't matter, but you're just like, of course that's how it goes. And it took me a while of coming to the Arnold, actually, because I remember coming to the first Arnold and I'm like, I don't want to go back to Columbus. Oh God, like that's,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to face that, but like now it's like I don't even think about it. But I've been going to the Arnold since, 2011 or so, 10, 11. And it's just repetition and like overriding and like proving over and like proof, change, build, just all like, I'm like, we're past critical scale,
Mm-hmm.
and that's awesome.
When you were at the peak of the figure, did you think that you were going to end up in bodybuilding, or did you just think you were going to stay in figure? Because there's the physique that kind of is in between all that, but it seems that there's a progression over a period of time, and it just kind of happens, I suppose, because you add more muscle each year.
I was going to go wherever my training took me.
Yeah. So you weren't particular.
Yeah. Oh, I was not hooked on figure. I definitely was more of a physique person because I had a ability to get a little bit more lean. But I always wanted to have size, and I never really thought I would earn my way to being a bodybuilder. And it really took someone else seeing that in me, and letting me know I was there or I was close. And I'm like, me? Like, I guess I still got so far to go,
Mm-hmm.
like there's no way I'm ready yet. I'm not done cooking.
So when did your accident come in? Was that when you were in figure or physique?
That was before competition.
Before competition.
Yeah, that was 2008. And I started competing in 2013. So people think that, I don't know how, people just write their own stories, but they're like, oh, she got into this because of the accident. I'm like, no, I got through it.
Yeah.
I got through the accident because I had my books. Like, my jaw was wired shut. I still got a scar on the side of my head from like 21 staples. My pelvis was snapped open, like open book fracture. My left foot was broken. So we got pins sticking out everywhere.
So what was it? A motorcycle accident?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There was like a Buick just changing lanes. We don't remember anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, probably one of the worst things I've ever been through. Very depressing times.
How long was the recovery for that?
About a year, a little bit longer for my husband. He was way more broken up than I was. Of course, he took the impact of me and the motorcycle and the Buick. So he still lives with pain to this day. I got very lucky that I don't really have any residual anything. And then he asked me to marry him. Mm-hmm. We were married the next year. So yeah.
All right, so then
I've never been closer to another human being.
So that was together. Separated then from the competing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that came much later.
You were training though.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was 2 years into training at least.
Did that light the fire to train harder?
Oh yeah. I was trying to figure out how to train in my room. I was in this care facility. Such sad places, really. And I was pretty young, so they knew that I didn't really belong there. But I gave my all in physical therapy. I had to learn how to walk again. I had to learn how to eat again. I don't recommend the jaw thing. That's one of the most traumatic things, is like when they're like, here's a pair of wire cutters. If you choke, if you gag, you're gonna have to cut your own mouth open to save your own life. So you live with that over your head for about 3 weeks because they can't keep you closed any longer than that. But yeah, they helped me in therapy, and they were like, here's a key. We know that you want to be down here and working on extra if you can. We trust you to be here by yourself. And I really appreciated those therapists. They helped me out a lot.
So you got married in what,
2009.
So you were 18.
Oh no.
Right?
No, I was 25.
Okay.
When we got married, I think.
But you met him when you were 18.
I met him probably when I was 16. Just in circles.
Yeah.
But we got together when I was like 19, 20. I know I spent my 21st birthday with him and his friends. Yeah.
And you're still together now.
Oh yeah. We're going on like 20 years. That's the love of my life.
When did the transition come for Physique?
Oh,
or did you just outgrow figure? I mean, was it a conscious thing or was it?
Oh, I remember. Well, they were saying that they wanted their figure girls to come in a little harder and leaner. And that ended up not being what they really were judging on at all. So I placed 4th at my second natural Olympia, which is the lowest I've ever placed in my entire career. I have 2 fourth places. And I was like, this is a physique look. This is a natural physique look. And from 14 to 15, that's I just made the switch over. And in 15, I won gold at the Natural Olympia, and that was the last of that federation that I ever did. I took a year off, and that's when I got into powerlifting. But yeah, the change into physique I was going to train hard.
So why was the year off? Was the year off because you were burned out from it, or the year off just to add more muscle?
Oh, it was a good time. I mean, I had done 13, 14, 15. So 3 shows, 4 shows. 4 shows in 15, and I had just won 2 back-to-back world championships. I had flown from Florida to Vegas 2 weeks apart, 2 different federations, 2 world championships. It was a good time to take a break. And I was like, okay, I've done a whole lot that I can do here. I'm clearly, I'm clearly ready for another federation. Let's put it that way.
Were you training yourself at this time too?
Yes. As far as
so how did that advance from working out with the Bowflex?
I think I can't remember what year it was that I got into personal training, and she had a personal studio. So it was just kind of like a small shop, but it had equipment, and it was the first equipment I had ever used. And boy, was that a treat, instead of having to make up all your stuff and tie things to this and that. And, it was, and it was air conditioned, I think. There was space, because I had actually 2 rooms in the house at that point. I had the far, far back room with the big Bowflex piece, and then the house was a U shape, and then I had more equipment in this room. So there were 7 rooms in this tiny little house, and I was taking 2 of them. But I was making it worth it. But yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question? My bad.
How did the training change?
Oh, I mean, I just kept studying, and I don't know what it was about my determination on this, but I didn't want my coach to program for me. I wanted to put all of the knowledge that I had collected to the test on myself. I wanted to train me. I wanted to build me. Some of that was the freedom to just explore and do the things that I wanted to do. Try whatever I wanted to try. I was not ready to be under one person's program. It just didn't feel right. I knew I had to build myself, and I didn't accept a program from anybody until, I took my first powerlifting program in 2016 from Chad French of Impact Fitness. But I still didn't do bodybuilding. I didn't take a bodybuilding program until maybe 2019.
Now, during that powerlifting time, were you bodybuilding as well, or was it 100% in powerlifting?
That's a good question. I don't remember really saying this is like my strength program right now. I'm all in on this. I highly doubt it. I don't think I would ever really. I mean, you always are going to have your repetition method anyway, so I don't feel like it was ever too much of a a separation.
And why the powerlifting?
I wanted to be as strong as I looked. Someone had said the term show muscles, and I was just, what? Like just for looks type muscles. And I was like, that is not it. And that's not going to be me. I mean, I've worked outside, I had worked outside pretty much my whole life. Or doing manual labor of some kind. So just being strong, I mean, it really appealed to me, and I wanted to see like, what I could do, and what is this other programming, and how does it work, and being able to move things that impressed me. And also, like, I mean, there's a feeling there that you're just not going to get anywhere else. And once I kind of had a taste for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can that be counterproductive though? I mean, when you're looking at heavy singles and triples in a bodybuilding program, there's going to be pros and cons. For you, the pros outweighed the cons.
I think I was I didn't really have any balance in that area. So it was kind of time to do those things, at least for my physique, or my body. Like I hadn't really, because I came from the back room of a house, and then I had like this little studio, which had plates and a bar.
Yeah.
And then, like I'm ending up over at like, I think it's called Fitness for All, and they had like turf and like really good equipment. And I had never really done that side of training. So, I mean, without that link, I would have been severely incomplete.
So the hard, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And then how did your physique change?
I mean, that kind of added on some rapid progress, because like you're not just training your strength, you're training your connective tissues and, like just becoming more, like more dense overall. And that in my opinion, it's going to be hard to separate it. Like it just lent itself to my goals. Like there was at the time no downside.
Well, at the same time of that, as those main lifts were getting stronger, were you able to use more weight on the accessory lifts?
Oh yeah.
All right. So then there's that carryover there too.
Yeah. I mean, you're teaching yourself, like for, really, really proper form, because you can't have anything less when you're doing something heavy. And then you're lending that over to everything else and your ability to push, and then knowing I've got more, like, is that really my top? And then now you've built the strength. So you've got more capacity for, like instead of doing 15s, you're doing 20s, you're doing 25s, even on like smaller movements, because the whole body has come up.
Yeah. So your smaller movements were coming up at a faster rate than they were before.
It was a whole new mentality.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that mentality was like, yeah, it was definitely time for that. Cause like I already.
What do you mean by mentality?
There, in bodybuilding, sometimes you have people that are like, well, it's lightweight for reps, and then powerlifting, heavyweight for few reps, but really the magic is like heavyweight for reps. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that to me is like really where the magic is, and you are not getting out of anything in that range. I mean, that's like some kind of like Tom Platz kind of shit.
Yeah.
So
your intent has to change, or your intent changed.
You're like, I'm capable of doing a lot more here, and I need to live up. I need to actually do that. So now that I'm stronger, I need to raise up this other stuff too, because I'm not just working in 45-pound range anymore. I'm up in a 65-pound range. So then you're like, okay, shoot, I can't really let myself out of this. I'm going to have to work in that 65 range or 165 range instead of 100-pound range where I used to. Mm-hmm. And that becomes, that's very mentally challenging. Like, can you go there? Can you now do, like those reps with this new weight that you're capable of? I mean, you got to break through. Was that another piece of the puzzle though, to be able to put your mind into to satisfy that dark void? Oh, absolutely.
Because I get it, right? It's different because you got to approach that set different than you're going to approach cable curls, with whatever.
Yeah.
Where if it's heavy for reps, you can't be the same person.
No, I mean, Let's rephrase that. Sorry, I got a little lost there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're if you're doing a standard easy bodybuilding movement, like a lot of people will do,
Yeah.
cable fucking curls with a zigzag bar, right?
Yeah.
And you're to compare that to, say, a heavy barbell curl to where you're going to go super fucking hard, or better comparison to a heavy deadlift, for deficit deadlift for 10 reps, which is brutal as fuck. That's a different mindset that has to approach that. Or if it's a heavy max effort bench or something like that. So the focus.
Yeah, it is that place where that this is going to be a challenge. Like, that this is within your capabilities to do. Everything in your programming is saying that you're capable of it. You're having a good day. You have just found this state of flow, right? So when you're approaching this bar, you're probably not going to get that on your curls quite as much. Definitely not in the same way. So, you're over, you've already set up the bar, you walk away from it, you're coming back to it with this whole new breath, whole new heartbeat, whole new determination. And it's like your mind is just like ticking, like almost like a countdown until you're about to execute all this stuff that you've been researching and planning. And exactly where everything needs to be. And then you got your hands on the bar, shoulders go back, and you're just driving up and through this. And
do you find with those sets you have to counter just a little bit of doubt, whereas, say, a side dumbbell raise, you're not going to have to counter that doubt?
I think there does come a good flow in all of your training when you do have these. And also, even with your adrenaline, you're probably not going to be at a 10 for 2.5 hours, so you're going to have to manage that, cultivate it, bring it up at the very beginning of you've got your warm up and then your heavy sets. So that's where you really need your focus, your push, your grind, your team, your attitude, back slaps, screaming, all of that. And then it's you kind of come down into the next stuff, but you still got your second lift. So you still need a little bit of that, still need your team, but then you're kind of going into your accessories. And even though you really need to focus on those because you're bringing up the weaknesses that you found in those first 2 lifts, you can kind of calm down a little bit and just focus on those movements and rep them correctly. So
then going back to your competitions, how did the transfer to Physique go, and how'd that first show go?
Oh man, my first Physique show, like I said, was the 2015 show. Well, the 2015 year, and that was, I was in DFAC, PNBA. I did a warm-up show in DFAC to qualify for their Worlds. Won it in Florida. Did a warm-up show for the PNBA, warm-up for the Natural Olympia. Won that. And then of course the powerlifting. But of course, I was in Physique now, so I needed to add the size.
Was that a culture shift? Because it's strength
sports.
Oh man,
I felt like I was getting more comfortable.
Okay,
I felt like I was getting more into the people that I needed to be with. More into my tribe. Because these ladies were much more hardcore, and and they trained a lot heavier and harder, and I was like, that's me. That's where I'm at. That's what I want to do. That's the people I want to find. So I was in Physique 15, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So I spent half a decade in Physique, and within that, got in with Main Street Barbell in 2018. And that really, it wasn't just the powerlifting that helped me change. It was actually getting with people, because I was alone. I trained completely by myself, maybe a couple people in the gym, but alone, no training partners, no team, no nothing until 2018. So 2006 to 18, beginning of 18. then it really took off.
All right. So before you had those people, the drive was all internal.
Yeah.
Which we've kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
And then now you get with other people that are willing to sacrifice for their goals. Sacrifice is a kind of a fucked up word, because I don't know if we personally sacrifice. It's the people around us that sacrifice, because how do you sacrifice when you're doing what you love? So it's,
we'll find a thousand ways that we didn't get what we wanted today.
I mean, for lack of a better word, you're around people that have the same mindset, to be able to go hard.
Yeah. It was the first time that I was around people who had competed at very high levels. And it was the first time that I had ever been around another woman that, I was like so small back then. So it's funny saying this now, but like I was always the big fish. And then I see this one chick and she's doing stuff that I have never seen any other woman do in the gym. And some of these gyms are pretty athletic, but not like what she was doing. And what she was doing was heavy, technically sound. She was quiet. She didn't talk to anybody. She worked and she left. And I was like, what was that? I have to find out who this person is. So shout out to Leah Hopkins-Fire, who has been the one and only training partner that has changed my entire life. I asked her where she was at. And of course I was asking everybody else, if I want to get strong, where should I go? And they're like, Main Street. Go to Main Street. They had just cleaved off of being at another gym due to some kind of, disagreement, and, had just, gotten into this warehouse, and that's where she was at. So, it took me a little while to get my confidence together, because I'm going in. Well, I think I went in with one girl. I went in with one other girl that I unfortunately never saw after that because she'd gotten sick. But it was like the universe has always found a way for me to like do things. So she got me in, and
Now, when you first saw her,
up.
was your mind still in that I want to know how she feels to walk around like that?
Partially, but it was just her technicality and her strength, and I just had never seen it. I had never seen it in Toledo. And of course I lived under a rock, and I wasn't at a whole bunch of gyms, but I was like starting to travel, and, like we would go off on a trip, do a gym out of town, and, starting to see things. And I still hadn't seen that. And, it was like, I finally got into Main Street, and I signed up, and then I did their very first meet there, which was in like a couple of days or something. And it actually ended up being like 28 days after I had just competed at the Arnold. So I was like 117 pounds. Mm-hmm. And but I came in because like I wanted to show them that I was serious. And I literally never left. And I can remember kind of like talking with Leah, and she was like, well, I'm training conjugate, and the other guys there don't want to do that or something along those lines. And I was like, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm studying right now. That's what I want to do. That was like my first programming was also in conjugate. And she was like, okay, great. Like I could tell she didn't really have much faith in me, but like I was coming in, and I mean, it did take me 6 years.
We'll get into the training here in a little bit, but from a broad view, what it sounds like you were doing is the weekends were more conjugate, than the weekdays were more your bodybuilding repetition stuff.
That's definitely how it is.
Okay.
Now.
So that's kind of how it.
And yeah, max effort on the weekends. I mean, during the powerlifting competitions that I did, I'm sure I was doing speed days elsewhere. I mean, it really just kind of depended on who was there.
Yeah.
Because like we've got our weekend crew, and then the week is like everybody's all scattered all over the place. So
with the powerlifting, after you did that meet, was it the same feeling that you had being on stage? I don't even know how to answer that, because it was like I was kind of doing this for, it was almost like fun, and there was like no expectation at all, and I could literally come in like all I had to do was weigh in. Like I didn't really they didn't care how you looked, they just cared how much you weighed. And in bodybuilding, they only care how you look, they don't care how much you weigh.
but it was very, you know, like another step in my development, like another thing that was like more proof to myself that this is where I'm meant to be. Like, and I wanted to be around those people. Like I wanted to be around those minds, because again, like underneath all of this is, you know, me trying to figure out like who I am, like where this is going, like how strong am I, like what are these things that can like cohabitate.
All right. So the powerlifting was an implement to be able to add more muscle to make you a better bodybuilder. And it was kind of always prioritized like that. But on the grand scheme, it was still becoming the strongest person you can be.
Yes. Yeah. I would say that second part. I mean, the powerlifting definitely changed my body, but it's like I have such a gravity to want to do it that anything I got from it was going to be a plus. And luckily, you know, like, yes, being able to squat more on my max effort meant that I was going to be able to do, you know, better for, you know, adding size to my legs. So of course that was the route, but I guess I just never really thought about it like that. It just kind of happened naturally.
Mm-hmm.
It was all such an adventure.
And then you turned pro in 2020.
Yes.
And
I mean,
that was a fucked up year.
I have a few pro cards. So
yeah,
but IFBB Pro.
Yes, the
2020.
Okay. Did you have shows move around during that time?
Oh my gosh. There is a really funny story. I just have some of the craziest stuff happen. 2020, I was supposed to do Chicago, NPC Chicago as an amateur, and then go on to do the Olympia as an amateur. And all those things got moved into a place where there was no way I could reach it. You know, we still thought that my sister was going to get married that year, and I could not do that to her. So, you know, I had finally decided that, you know, like I just want to go to the Olympia. I'm ready to just test myself with these amateurs. Life is short. Nothing is promised. Like, I'm very much like, if we're going to live, like we should live. We should probably do that now. Just in case. You know, like, what are you waiting for? You know, like this has gone on such a roll, and like, you know, nothing had really stopped. And I'm like, you know, I'm not ready. I'm nervous. I'm never ready for any of this stuff, but I'm like, let's go. So anyway, those shows got moved. But I was ready. I was deeply conditioned, and I was like, I need to go and do a competition that just speaks to my soul. I'm just going to travel for this one. That's going to be me this year. Like, I never imagined as an athlete I'd just be able to say something like that, go like on a spirit competition. But I went to New Orleans. I went to Louisiana, actually Metairie, and I competed there at a local show that I didn't even realize was a national qualifier, and I won. So now here I am with a nationals qual, not having any concept of how big nationals was. Like, sometimes I don't do my research, and I don't really have people telling me like what things were. And my coach was from a completely different federation. So like, well, we're nationals qualified. Think on it. Let's do it. Let's do it. You know, I've got nothing to lose. And I was in such good shape, because I had been able to reverse diet out of my out of my cut for this for Warrior Games, which was in Tate. So I was healthy, I was fed, I was full, you know, my cardio was low. So I mean, that was one of the healthiest.
So you didn't have shows that were canceled during that time?
I think they were moved, and I just could not reach them with my time frames. Like, you know.
Well, one of the things I've always wondered, because there were a lot of deaths during that time too, which was people talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
And now either there still are, but we just don't talk about it. I don't know. Or there's not. And I wonder during that time period, are these all happening because the shows keep getting fucking moved? You know, you have people that are, you know, it's not healthy prep, peaking for a show.
Yeah.
And so now you got people in a peak, and it's like, oh no, fucking show's canceled. Here's another one in 8 weeks. And they got to extend that for that longer time and that longer time, which when I hypothesized this before, it's like, what, there's a million other reasons that it could have been. But now looking back, it's kind of like, well, you know, that's the only one that really, you know, was that changed compared to what we see now. from that. So in some regards, it could be a good thing that she got
helped.
married, because it allowed you to rebound out of the
she
show.
didn't get to. No, she didn't get to.
Oh, she didn't get to.
No, everything was so messed up. So it was just, but it ended up being great for me.
Mm-hmm.
She is married now. It was
Okay.
a lovely wedding. But it was, I mean, COVID was great for me. I mean, it was very hard. My husband was working like 16, 17-hour days. He would come home and he would have like 2 hours of home time before he would have to turn around and go back to the nuclear power plant and do it all over again, because it was just so brutal. So I was alone a lot. And that could have been bad for me, but it ended up, being, one of the best competition years. And I trained out of Anthony Dodd's garage gym with Leah, and we had some really great sessions in that garage. And, like I would train out of the back room again. So kind of going back to my roots. And it was a pretty lonely prep and year. But it was a really good one, and I have a lot to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt bad for people who were really struggling, because I was like, man, that was a great year for me.
How did you then move into bodybuilding?
Well, at Warrior Games in Louisiana, I met Isabel Terrell. Now, I didn't know who this woman was, but I mean, from across the room, I'm looking at this woman, and I'm like, I have got to say hi to her. She doesn't look like anybody else here. She is built. She's tall. She's absolutely gorgeous. Like, what business do I have even like stopping her for some of her time? And then she came up to me. And just, I mean, with these dark eyes, just looked right into me, and complimented my physique. And she's like, this is bodybuilding. This is bodybuilding. Just like that. And I was like, kind of in shock, because, like, not only had this interaction just been amazing, and then I realized who she was, which is like royalty. So, I mean, like, I'm speaking to this incredibly high powered woman, and she's telling me what she sees in me, just like she's giving me advice as a sister. And that was the first time. And then it happened several more times at that competition, from people that were running the show or just asking me if I was in bodybuilding. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy, so I just kind of came out of, this underground training stuff. And then I'm popping out of this show. And I mean, I definitely really, I mean, I see it in those pictures now, but I couldn't see it in myself then, because I was like, there's no way that I'm like, I'm not big enough for bodybuilding yet, but it's where I always wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look up to those women. Those are the women that I wanted to be. Not just, I mean, I have a love for all of the divisions, but the women that bodybuild professionally, and their look, their discipline is, to me, one of the ultimate in sports. And they are also some of the rarest athletes on earth. I felt very much in tune with that.
Mm-hmm. And then your first show was a Chicago Pro?
Yeah, that was my pro debut.
Yeah.
My first bodybuilding show. It was my first show with Brandon Ray as my coach. I had been with Terry McBee from Team Hard Body for 7 years. She had coached me, like, nutrition, manipulating my cardio and whatnot. But I had done all my own training. Well, except for, leading up to nationals, Shane Sweat had done some powerlifting programming for me, and I really liked how he did that. So I used it as bodybuilding programming. He says hi, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was kind of a wild situation.
How so?
Like, realizing that you're there, that people are seeing it in you, winning your pro debut is kind of like the ultimate, like, you're coming out of the gate swinging, and like, you really do get a lot of attention right off the bat, which was kind of interesting because like I didn't feel very ready for it. But then again, this has happened to me in my career many times, you know, like if you kind of look through or like listen to me talk about some of these stories, like, you know, went to my first natural Olympia, 2 silver medals, you know, then I'm winning gold by my third, and it takes people like a decade, you know, to do some of this stuff, you know. So there's a little bit of like, I don't want to say guilt, but you're just like in shock because like people work so hard. They work so hard for this. And for me to win my pro debut was just, and then, you know, I mean, now you are Olympia qualified. You're going. There's no like turning this down. Like you're going from your pro debut for, you know, a whole bunch of firsts. And I'm back in Chicago, right?
Well, in Chicago was a perfect score too, right?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I don't know if I really look at the scores. And that's my husband kind of looks at the numbers. But remember what I was saying in 2020, I said I was going to do Chicago, that show, and then I was going to do the Olympia as an amateur. Now, just out of sheer luck, I'm winning Chicago as my first pro show, and I'm going to the Olympia as a pro. What are the odds? This kind of thing happens to me.
Well, what happened next, though?
Well, let's see. Chicago was my birthday. It was also exactly on my birthday, July 23rd. I mean, the hype was crazy, you know, like, and I had to get really good really fast. Like I really had to polish a lot of things, make sure that my finances were in order, to make sure that I could, you know, like make the show what it was supposed to be and be able to stay as long as I needed to. And, you know, like Brandon really he'd seen something in me at nationals, and it took me about a year to circle back and like get my, you know, like actually get my courage together to hire him. But I mean, we nailed our first prep, and I couldn't believe it. Like it was almost like too good. But
what do you mean get your courage back to hire him?
Well, I had a really bad year in 2021. You know, and I was switching from this coach that I had been with for so long, but we both knew that it was time for me to go with someone who knew IFBB Pro women's bodybuilding. And I just had a good feeling about Brandon. And honestly, it was Brandon or John Meadows. And, you know, so the universe pointed me towards Brandon, basically. And it's just insane that like coming to your first Olympia, you know, and taking silver. And I still didn't think that I was quite the right shape and size to even be silver, but I'm like, this is the universe is just telling me something. Like like this, it's not about what I see in me. Like this is like professional judging. This is, people don't know who I am really much at all. And, you know, if these are the scores, then then I have to like really believe this. I have to believe in myself.
Now, around that same time, didn't the universe kick you in the head?
Well, 21, I was pretty sick, and I wasn't really sure if I wasn't sure if I would survive another prep. Like we couldn't figure out what was wrong. Went to a lot of, went to specialists, and like we just couldn't figure out what it was. And luckily that has like toned down. It's not completely gone, but it's toned down. But like at some point that was such a hard decision because like that's the thing is like I wasn't ready for Chicago. I wasn't ready. I was gonna do like Omaha or something, and I was like, I can't do it. Like there's nothing that's drawing me there. That would force me to push. Like I'm not ready for that. This doesn't sound right. And then finally, like almost like the last one that was there was Chicago, and I'm like, that's it. Without even really realizing the duality, I'm like, all right, let's do Chicago. And I really had to go into that prep with like very self-aware, with a lot of faith, with a lot of like just listening to my body. But at the same time, I had been so sick in 21 that my prep in 22 was like nothing could touch me. Like I just felt almost like invincible in my prep, because I know what really suffering felt like. And this, like a little bit of diet change, a little bit more cardio, like getting up early, like I did not care.
How would you describe your being sick?
I can only really describe them as like episodes. And if anybody's ever had anything like this, I would love for you to reach out. But it would just be these, sometimes they would last an hour, sometimes they would last 7 or 8 hours.
How would it manifest?
I mean, it was not, people are like, oh, it's anxiety, it's panic. I'm like, it's not in my mind. I'm having a great day, but like, it's in my body. It's like my body's shutting down. I feel like I would lose like all my strength. And I really could not do anything but like lay on the couch or lay in bed and just meditate and basically hold on to my life and think, I'm really practicing like everything positive that I can possibly think of to make sure that I don't slip in one direction or the other, because even though it wasn't psychological, I knew that like only my mind was really going to get me through whatever it was that was physically happening. So I mean, there was, deep feelings in my chest, just almost like your body's throwing codes, like something bad is going to happen. Even though like
your soul's being pulled out of your throat.
I mean, possibly, but it's a very physical feeling.
Like AFib?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have
heart
no
rate?
idea. I don't really remember too much about, my heart rate, because I mean, I would kind of do my blood pressure, because like, yeah, like everything would just kind of drop. And it would just be anytime, like it could be while I was driving. It could be, like in the middle of anything at any time. So there was no predicting it, which made it so scary. And I was like, it was part of the reason why I quit my job.
Would this happen when you were training?
I don't really remember during training. I mean, a lot of it is kind of like blacked out because it was so bad. I can remember some of the really rough times, but I'm like, I'm just going to be honest about this, because like, this is literally what I was going through. And if you don't understand like how bad it was and how scared for my life I was, then you're not really going to understand, the significance of everything that has come after, or like how good I feel now. And it really was about a year long. And I have no idea.
So that'd be another example where bodybuilding pulled you out of it.
Oh, that is, I had to find out what I don't want to say if I'm going to die, I'm going to die doing this, but I was going to try. I had never canceled a show in my life. I'd never needed to, I can't imagine like backing out of a commitment, or being in a position so bad that I would have to stop. But I'm like, I have to try. Like, this is the thing that I love. And bodybuilding has saved my life so over and over and over again that I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to treat myself the best I possibly can. And I'm going to go, I'm just all in, and at that point, like I said, there was like nothing could really hurt me, because as long as I wasn't feeling like that, I could handle just about anything he threw at me. And luckily it was a pretty decent prep.
Was that a different level of all in mentally?
Absolutely. Because, like when you're sitting by yourself, and you love this thing, it has given me so much. It has saved me. Like I am this thing. It chose me. It literally chose me. So I had to be like, this is choosing me again. I'm going to follow this through. I'm going to see what this lesson is next. If I cannot do it, I mean, I've got my circle around me. I've got this great new coach that's seen a ton of stuff. But of course, at the end of the day, I realized that only I know what is going on here. Only I am feeling this. No one else has like any, like, they can't, you know what I'm saying? When you're talking to somebody from the outside and they're just like, Okay, so it's bad, huh? Okay. You know, they have just no idea. And like I had to choose for me if this was like how I don't want to say how I was going to go out, but of course, I mean, it was crossing my mind.
Mhm.
I can't say that I wasn't, but I just kind of had to take every day as it came. And then I realized that I was doing all right and we were getting close to the show and I managed everything. And so even to this day, I'm like, if I'm having a bad day, if I really can't train, I don't. If I really know in my body that it is a bad idea to train, I don't really worry about like pushing through or being tough about it, because if I cannot recover from that, it's going to take so much more from me, and I just don't. There's not that kind of energy in reserve. So the times that I actually am like, nope, can't train today, it's like once a year.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe once in a great while, and when I'm like, today is not it. You just have to like kind of teach yourself that, because otherwise you will go through anything, you will go anywhere until you realize that I can't drive. I cannot drive out there on a road and have everybody be safe. Like there's no way. Like that's how bad it was. Like I couldn't get up. I could not drive, you know, so let alone get to the gym. I'm like, no.
Yeah. So after that time period in the show, what was the lessons that you learned?
Oh man, I mean, I was so grateful. And it was like, here it is again. You know, like I put my complete faith and trust in bodybuilding, which is honestly all of your own capabilities. Like I trusted myself to be able to know what was too much, what was going on, and that the decision that I had made was correct. Not only was it correct, it paid off in an unimaginable way. Like, I mean, I would have been happy to just compete at my first Olympia. You're telling me I've got like legit hardware on my first try. This is
So walk me through that day.
unbelievable. Oh gosh, I'm like kind of blacked out from competition.
Well,
but
I'm kind of looking at the prep for that based upon what you're telling me was easier because you've already been through harder.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It wasn't.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I know what hell looks like. You know.
Not a big deal. So now you're at the show, and let's just start with you getting the first call out.
I almost didn't realize it because I was so focused on, you know, what I was doing that I didn't know who I was standing next to. I didn't realize where they had placed me. One of the handlers, Steve, that I had actually met either at Nationals, I think it was at Nationals, he recognized me and he was just so excited. And he was like, you know, like, oh, you did it. Like, you're good. And I'm like, he's like, you're in the top 4. I'm like, is that good? You know, I'm just like, just so ridiculous. And he was like, yes, this is good, you know. And
so you didn't know going in based upon your conditioning?
No, I had no idea. In 2020, I had gone to see my very first Olympia, and that was Isabel Terrell had encouraged me to go because I'm fresh from Nationals, you know, go show your face. And of course that was women's bodybuilding's, you know,
comeback,
second coming, you know, and oh man, that was emotional. I had no idea what it was going to feel like to be in the audience, to see these legends, these gems in the crown of bodybuilding take the stage and perform and just own that piece of what they deserved. And just you know, Jake Woods giving his speech about them being back, and it just I felt, you know, that, and that was another part of me like switching into women's bodybuilding. I'm like, that if they are that rare, that hated, you know, like look what's happened to them. Like, and I'm that, I am that, like, and I'm going, I'm going to give it my best. You know, but the day in 2022 Olympia, like that day, I just didn't even, you know, and they're calling top 2. And I'm almost like, there's no way, you know, because I didn't, not that you're always overshadowed with self-doubt, but I mean, I truly didn't believe that I had the size. And a lot of people came down on me for that. I was pretty well conditioned, and I also agreed that I didn't have the size that I would have wanted, you know, Miss Olympia to have, but there was something about my composition, and and I'm getting all this feedback as I'm getting up to the show. My coach, and I've heard you say this, like, if you're getting compliments from your coach, sometimes you're like, either they're not paying attention or they're just feeding you, and there was a part of me that's like, no, I have to trust these people. I have to trust her. She's on my side. I have to trust my coach. This does not work if I don't trust them. Right. So I had to put my own stuff aside and just get out there and literally become this professional. And when you're like top 2, like, it's just sheer disbelief and joy, because you went in with no expectations. And of course, these are the women I'm trying to be, let alone the fact that I'm sitting in a row, at check-in for women's bodybuilding and men's bodybuilding, and I'm seeing the best in the world. Like, down the row from me is Irene Anderson and Hele Trevino. Oh my God. I'm sitting in the front row with these legends, and I'm here with them. I just get to sit with them.
Did you feel like you belonged, or an outsider?
Well, you're a rookie, so I mean, that's what it is. You're new, but they were so welcoming. They wanted me there. They absolutely believe in the next generation of women's bodybuilding. And it was, I really felt a sisterhood right away. And it has been like that through the competitions. Like, I used to compete against people that, just faceless or figure physique women that I was never going to see again. And now, like, I know these women. We see each other, at these top shows, because I am, the best in the world. And we give a shit about each other. We support each other. Like, it's a very special place to be in sports.
So how do you feel after the show?
That's, people kept asking me that. Well, how do you feel? And there's no words for a brand new feeling like that. There's no description. You're a little confused. You're elated. You have this joy that you have never felt in your life. And like you are charged. Like, you have been charged with the energy of all of this. Like, like, especially when you're done, like, I mean, of course, like, you just want to cry, because the whole thing has been overwhelming. Your whole life has led up to this, and it worked. Your whole life, the biggest show of your life, and you actually have something incredible to show for it. I still struggle describing that feeling. It is everything you hope it would be and more.
How did you change after that, leading into the next one?
Well,
because now there's expectations.
Oh yeah. But again, in other areas of my career, I got really good really fast. So I'm like, you're telling me that this is like, it's like from my first 3 shows to my first NPC shows to my first pro shows, and I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, no one else is surprised. I'm surprised. Because some people are like, well, of course you did. Look at you. And I'm like, well, there's still a lot of internal work to do, because this is as big as it gets. So there is suddenly, like, this next year, like, how do you do everything right? How do you eliminate, mistakes? How do you make sure you avoid the major landmines on arms, legs, and how do you streamline for this? Cause it's overwhelming. Like, how do you come up that hard, that fast, and manage your mental state and your physique. I mean, luckily I was in really good hands with my coach. He had done a lot of this before. I think I was his first top 2 Olympian. So I kind of broke ground there with him as well. But I mean, he's been coaching top level for many years, many different women. So he has the experience, which I didn't even know when I hired him. I just had a good feeling about the guy because he was, he knew his shit, and he gave a crap about me. And I only did my research on him after I hired him, and then I realized that he had coached all of these other women. I'm like, oh my God, I'm right where I need to be. Again, one of those just universe lineups that just blow your mind. So, I mean, I just kind of left it in his hands, and, he gave me some space for a little bit to enjoy it. And, then you realize how much of your entire year it's always been that way for me. My whole year is like around my sport. I don't really take time off. I don't really prefer to. I just kind of move things around. But I just kind of left it in his hands as far as scheduling, and like, staying at that level of focus for that long it's really not what most sports do, because they have seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So when your off season is your season, and then you have prep, which is like your honing phase, you really have to level up mentally, and like, and you're either someone said this at the very first show I watched. She's like, you're either made for it or you're not. I was like, oh, well, I'll try. So, but yeah, just going through that first year of being a pro and being that high level, just insane expectations. And of course, everyone who's ever known me is, back in my corner. And I was so proud to bring that back for like Jimmy, because he'd been in my corner for like 10 years, because he saw me at my first show, and he was just like, I've never seen a natural this good come from Toledo. And he invited me into his gym. He never wanted me to pay. He was like, you deserve that respect, so bringing that back for my mom, my dad, my family, my husband, who has sacrificed so much, my team at Main Street, like, oh my God, no one has done what I have done. And here I am, like, doing it again. And then now we've got this year.
So how was the second one? What was your expectations going into the second one?
Oh gosh, the second one was a lot harder. Just some things I had. So there's Rising Phoenix, right? That was my, I don't want to say warm up show, but Rising Phoenix is the biggest women's bodybuilding competition right now. You have the Olympia, but Rising Phoenix was what held it down in place of the Olympia while, we were dismissed. So it's very prestigious. I went and competed at that one. That was an amazing show, great prize money, just very well run. I really loved my look there. And that was, and I was top 2 there again. So now I'm right behind Miss Olympia twice. So it's she and I at finals again. I feel like I kind of had her at that one, and I can say that looking back pretty confidently. I really loved my look for that. But in between Rising Phoenix and the Olympia, I had gotten back from Rising Phoenix, and it's like your worst nightmare that something's going to happen while you're gone to, like, a family member or one of your animals. And, it was one of our cats. She'd been with us since we got married, really. She'd been with us for all these years, and she just wasn't right when we got back. And it was, the entire gap between Rising Phoenix and the Olympia, we were just watching her die. And it was, we had there was no sign of anything before we left, but it was like a really aggressive cancer. And this, she's just ours. She's ours. Or she's my husband's baby, and, we tried, and there was nothing we could do. So we ended up, she chose, to be when she wanted to go. And it was the Thursday before I flew out for the Olympia. So I didn't really have much time to process, and like everything was I was completely overwhelmed, with the grief of that and not being able to help her. And of course, we couldn't have anybody come in if we left because none of our cats like anybody. So even if we could have somebody come and feed her, like it was, and like I'm crying at night, like, and I don't cry, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, I can't, if we leave, she dies alone. If we, like what, that's your family member, and I couldn't pull my shit together, seeing her struggle to breathe, before we figured out really what it was, because we didn't really know until the very end.
And this is before you really start pulling water off too?
Well, in between, there was like a month or 5 weeks or so in between Rising Phoenix and the Olympia, so they were back to back.
Okay.
And
I'm noting that because the stress is going to increase your water retention. I still hadn't written
my performance piece.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing to me is, like not just your presentation and your mandatories, but your night performance to me is like the pinnacle of what you get to do as a bodybuilder on stage. And I am not a stage person. I get stage fright every time. I don't know how I do it. I face it every time, but that performance to me means everything. That is the only time that I get to do exactly what I want to do with my body, with it being, the deepest form of art that I can performance art that I can achieve. So I still didn't have my performance piece. So I'm trying to write it. And I can't because I'm worried about her. I'm still trying to prep, and, like I'm worried about, him. Cause like, that's our family and everything. And it just was so chaotic and just so sad, and I remember like I couldn't get to the gym to train, of course, because I'm feeling just god awful, or not to train but to practice. So instead of trying to write my performance piece through motion, I wrote it down because I couldn't get there, and I wanted to stay with her as long as I could. And somehow that worked. Writing that down, I wrote that performance a week out from the show. I do not recommend it. It was the most stressful thing, but it just wasn't coming. It wasn't coming, So I mean, my body's reacting weird because I'm stressed and, like half in grief, and, like I still don't have this performance piece done. It's the Olympia. You cannot come without and unbelievably, I pulled off one of the best performances of the evening with a brand new pose that no one has ever done before. And I just told myself, this is what professionals do when shit gets really rough. And like, these are things that I can't control. And I'm trying so hard to keep myself stable and focused and help everywhere that I can. But I have to execute this. I have to do this, and I can't, unbelievably, I was able to perform that piece with the most stage presence that I've ever had in my life. Like I can come out from this, this crazy backstage because they've got this, this hidden door that goes up and you come out and, your music's going, and I didn't lose my place once. I wasn't scared by the crowd. Like you're looking out over 7,000 seats with smoke just echoing over everyone's head. And it's really easy to kind of have like vertigo almost, because you're kind of used to having smaller spaces. So you can kind of lose your balance. You can lose your place, and like back behind me, there's 7 12-foot screens of exactly what I'm doing. And somehow I was able to drop into that.
Was there a flow state that you entered?
Yes.
Was that there before?
No. I had wanted that so bad. I just wanted to be in my performance, in my piece, creating it with the most, with the most life, like with my whole heart. Because I knew that people can sense that. They can see that.
Oh, you can see it.
And it draws them in. And that's the only way that I can touch people. And like that really does matter to me. That if I'm when I'm posing and performing that you're not thinking, like, you're just like, wow, you know, is that, you know, or just kind of like, I've never seen, you know, maybe something that you've never seen, because I don't take inspiration from really anywhere. I do everything myself. But actually feeling that for the first time in all these years, you know, like, I felt like I had evolved.
So how do you think you're going to replicate that?
Well, I'm going to start a lot sooner on my performance piece, because that I do need to write it, but, you know, and having the right music is of course key. But I think, you know, I'm hoping that is something that once I've been there, that I can tap back into it. Kind of like, you know, as you know, you fail on a lift, but then you adapt.
Well, my question
You
was,
know,
did the grief help you lock into that? Because
Well,
that would be fucked up. But I can see it being reality.
we had to, you know, she had gone into surgery, and, you know, basically, you know, they called mid-surgery, and she was comfortable. So we're like, you know, now's a good time. So we picked her up, and, you know, we were able to bury her together. And on the one hand, it was like, you know, she chose to do this so that you know, that we wouldn't have to decide. And she, you know, like, she knew.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, we grieved for like 12 hours, and then, you know, like, the next day, like, right back to it. And it was a relief, because, you know, the people there were so amazing at that hospital, and, you know, she had such a good life. And, you know, now I knew that I wasn't going to have to leave her alone, or try to, you know, she was home permanently, and she was okay. And I had to use that. Like, I had to be like, okay, that's a gift, you know, to be able to get up and, you know, and try to kind of compartmentalize, at least until later. So, but it was good, you know, at the competition, to know that, you know, it was already finalized. It was already over.
How did it feel being called second in that one?
Well, what's funny is that both of our names start with A.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you've got a Diane and an Angela or something. So it's like Andrea, Angela. So when the S starts, like, nobody really still knows yet. Oh God, it was just insane. But I'll tell you what, though. One thing that I really loved about taking that second place was I knew that I was right where I needed to be. I actually was very glad to have had a second chance at second place, despite everything that had just happened, because that was not like a really great way to go into a competition at all. Like, I made a lot of mistakes, and I was just so more guilt-ridden on that I couldn't hold my shit together. You know, because it was just, you know, I just emotionally was not ready for any of that to happen. But, you know, when it finally happened, you know, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, and Andrea is just like fist pumping for herself, and she's like jumping off the platform, jumping off the stage. And I'm like, I did that. She's happy. She's thrilled right now, because I was behind her last year. I was just behind her at Rising Phoenix. This means something to her. As friends, as a friend, like, I pushed her to be her absolute best at this. And she usually, you know, people are like, usually she just takes her medal and it's like, thank you, very, you know, very, you know, gracious. She doesn't ever do that. You know, so to see her kind of come out of herself with the joy of taking that win for her, you know, I kind of take a little bit of credit for that. And I just, you know, just as friends, I think that's like a pretty cool thing to do.
Now, over the years, you mentioned something about having a hard time getting your off-season weight up. What came about to allow you to break through that?
I think it's just time. You know, I mean, and just really, like, you got to wrap your head around how much you got to eat. And it is so easy for time to slip by, for the day to kind of, you know, get away from you, or for you to do things for other people, or work comes up, and, you know, meals slip by so easy. And especially, you know, in the back of your mind, you're like, I know that's going to hurt. I'm not even ready for that meal yet. So let me just take care of this other job, or this, you know, run this errand, or train this client, or get this job done. And then I'll eat. It cannot be like that. Like, you really have to have a sense of urgency with those meals. You got to start early. And you just got to stay on top of that clock. Like, if you don't prioritize it, you know, because I just didn't really realize, like, I thought I was bulking hard. You know, I mean, I used to like run my hand under cold water while I would like sip on these shakes. Like, I didn't have like mass shakes back in the day, so I would make them out of like bagels and rice and protein powder.
Why are you putting your hand under cold water?
To distract from the discomfort of how full you are and how much you have to eat, because this isn't fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. It worked all, you know, at least for me, because I mean, I was not, especially back then, I was not used to that kind of consumption. But if I was going to put on the size, or at least try to do some kind of intelligent bulk cycle, like, I was going to have to figure out new mental strategies, new ways. But yeah, just really realizing that this is the job. Like, your job is to eat. Like, nothing, like, everything else has to kind of go to the side. If you can multitask, great. But for me, I can't. So like, I've got this like callus on my elbow from where I sit at the counter, and I will like just not leave the counter until I'm done with my food, because if I take it somewhere else, I'll get distracted, and I get distracted pretty easy. So just staying with that meal over and over and over again to make sure that I finish it, you know.
Is that the hardest part for you?
Yeah, I'd say finishing it, or well, sometimes starting it's the hardest part.
Yeah. Well, just the eating.
Volume, you know, bulk nutrition is a whole other animal, because I think a lot of people can relate with a cut, you know, like a little bit fewer calories, maybe not as many carbs as you want, or, you know, maybe, you know, not eating for 16 hours. Like, people can relate with that, but they cannot relate to eating all of this food. Must be nice, you know. Oh, I could do that. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't do that every day. You cannot do that every day. I mean, I can't do it every day. I try. But yeah, I mean, it's just a whole new level of uncomfortable that you have to navigate. So, and yeah, I mean, my body doesn't really want to put on size, like weight. Like, I love to train, and I thought it would kind of just be easier if I could like just, you know, get these other strategies in, but you gotta push it. Yeah, I do.
And how long do you have to push it? How long do you try to push it for? Granted, the off season's going to change based upon competitive schedule.
I pretty much started as soon as I could. I didn't really do a fancy reverse diet after the last one. So maybe that helped. Like, I was like, I just, you know, I need to get this size on me. I don't know how everyone else does it and like gets these, you know, crazy jumps in weight. Cause like, I'm still working on it, but yeah, I didn't really reverse diet. I just kind of went back into eating normally, let that settle. And then there was, and then he gave me kind of like my bulk diet, and I let that settle. And then we added the splash meals, and we let that settle. And then after that, it was like, well, if I can add, you know, a little bit to breakfast, a little bit to lunch, just wherever I can, because by then, like, I had kind of like topped out, and like nothing was really gonna make a major fluctuation on me, or, you know, traumatize my my intake too much. So I mean, that was kind of the strategy that I used for the rest of the year, until we kind of just narrowed, I mean, like, literally went from just about as much as I could do to a brand new diet, and then we just kind of stuck with that.
So where are you at right now?
Oh, it's manageable. It's nice. So, I mean, like macros wise, or
Well, I mean, are you in bulking? Or are you starting
I'm
already?
8 weeks out.
Okay, so you're 8 weeks
A
out.
little,
So
yeah,
some of it's pulled down.
yeah, yeah. So, August 24th is the first show. Rising Phoenix.
Mhm.
So a duplicate of last year, Rising Phoenix Olympia. Same top level competitions. They're the biggest ones in the world that you can get your hands on. And yeah, I mean, it's nice because I did bulk so hard, and I did finally get up into the 170s for the first time. Thank you. That, you know, when you do cut, it does have a wonderful effect on how much you can still eat
Yeah.
and make progress. So I don't have to
Well, I think
start.
that's important to kind of put out there. So during that time, you're trying to increase your calorie content as much as you can, because the dieting is going to be, you're going to start
Yes.
at a higher macro level
Yeah.
with that. So how high did your calories get?
Okay, so I would try for 5,000. I usually landed around 45 to 48. So those last 200 calories are just, kind of haunt you a little bit, or whatever meal you couldn't finish kind of haunts you. But yeah, like that is like the consistent route, because like once your body is, I mean, you do treat it just like almost like a competition diet, because that way your digestion, your microbiome is like really adapted to digesting the same things all the time. Rice, chicken, beef, eggs, the whole thing. Anything you'd imagine a bodybuilder would do is probably what I'm doing. But that digestion scale where you're not really throwing in crazy stuff all the time is really going to help. And then, it takes some discipline to do it for a year. But the results and the relief on your on stressors when you do get into season are so much less, because it's really just, you're just kind of like gliding in. There's really not a whole lot of changes, because like your metabolism is already running pretty high. Maybe we actually added some cardio before we even changed the diet, and that helped right away. So there's a lot of different ways to manipulate it, but keeping your calories high in the off season, high for you, high maybe pushing, a little boundary a little bit is going to pay off, because once you get down, you don't have to cut as much, and saving yourself that misery and also muscle wasting and of course, stress hormones is everything you want, because you want to be as calm as possible through this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So how do you set your training up? So let's get into that, because you train almost every day. Right?
Yes.
So 7 days a week. So the way that I kind of saw that unfold is the weekends are the heavy stuff and the weeks, the bodybuilding stuff. But what does this look like?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been waking up at 4:30 a.m. to get to Main Street every weekend for like the last 6 years. And I didn't miss a weekend at all in my very first year, because I felt like I had to prove it. And of course I'm there because, I'm of watching you guys. Like it was the first time I was able to actually, experience an environment like what you guys had, and absolutely loved it. So weekends, let's see, Saturday, max effort upper. So your bench variations, maybe some overhead presses. Sunday is going to be max effort lower. So the very end of the week, your heaviest lower body lifts. So squat, usually for me right now, it's spider bar. Really fallen in love with that. Have kind of strayed away from deadlifting a little bit, but I do a lot of heavy rack pulls. Monday is off. Tuesday upper. Wednesday heavy quad day. Thursday upper. Friday you've got some glutes and calves. So Tuesday and Thursday we're kind of working on right now, just kind of a shift in what we're doing. But yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all bodybuilding volume, but also with the weight that I'm capable of. So you can't really phone it in on those days either. So Tuesday back and biceps, Thursday arms, maybe a little bit of chest.
Then how do you progress that? So let's look at the weekends separate than the weekdays, because the max effort is going to have to change more frequently than during the week. But during the week, are the exercises changing every time you go in, or are you staying with one movement and trying to progress up in it?
Well, with that, I have Brandon do my programming these days, because I want him to have that objective look. Like, we need to slap some clay on here, some clay on here. So like usually he'll give me a program and I write it, and I just kind of put it into my notes, and I kind of do just, progressive overload. Or, if I'm having like a really low day, maybe I'll kind of treat it like a speed day. But I do have that flexibility in the week that if I'm really not well or whatever, I can kind of, there's no like a standard, like, here's your weights or anything.
Yeah.
But he does work with heavy sets of 8. Like, that seems to be something that from the very beginning, that's like one of his favorite things. So you say heavy sets of 8. In my mind, I'm thinking 8 rep max, of course, but that seems to be like a lot of the work. So especially on the bigger muscle groups, back, legs, chest, for sure, so that's kind of, most of the work is within heavy 8s.
So then how do you rotate the weekends, the max effort stuff?
Actually, I'm privileged enough to train with Leah. So Leah's training underneath Laura Phelps. They're getting ready for some stuff. So I get to train with her. So I follow a lot of the Queen Bee power programming. And sometimes I'll take some liberties with it, or I'll just do the main movement with her. Sometimes like on upper day, like we just have such good training sessions, man. Just like, helping each other out and like getting things set up and like going through, and like sometimes we'll make it like a circuit, sometimes not. Like it's always different, of course, but sometimes I need to break off and like maybe do a little bit more, like just go straight to glutes and hamstrings, which the equipment at Main Street is just perfectly suited for. Of course you're doing your verse hypers and like GHRs and whatnot. So
how do you decide when to break off?
Well, sometimes there's like I've got my heavy quad day on Wednesday. So maybe I'll squat, but I'll kind of skip that secondary movement or like another quad movement because I've already hit him pretty hard. And I know I need to use the majority of my time for a little bit more posterior chain stuff. And I mean, what's nice is that, I mean, I can kind of decide for myself. But upper days are generally together. But I might need like another back exercise because they're there for a little bit. Like I wasn't training back as a day. I was doing back every day. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe like during that time I would do maybe 2 or 3 back movements just to kind of pump it up a little bit and get a little bit more deep into the muscle that day. So that's kind of an example.
What during this last off season, what were the things you were trying to bring up?
Well, my arms, for sure. Biceps, back is always a big one. We did get into adding, like making sure there was like a solid glute day. A lot of these things are what I want to do, like what I want to see on my body, but also, luckily, the advice that I'm getting is pretty much the same. And unfortunately, the advice that I've gotten is, unfortunately, is, well, a little bit of this. Literally, after my first Olympia, they're like, add 3 pounds here and here, and keep doing what you're doing. Because I managed to get into the elevator with the judges. I was like, can we do this now? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, 3 pounds is oddly specific. And somehow I nailed it. Somehow I nailed those exact 3 pounds. But yeah, the adjustments and suggestions for me are pretty minute. So like when we're coming up with overall size, like I still want to have like massive quads. Like I've had this stupid glute injury for like the last 4 months. So I'm going to have to try and work, a little bit more hamstrings to make up for that, to kind of, make sure that everything is well rounded. And now that I'm feeling a lot better. But, they said arms, you're always going to need more back, and glutes. Because like when working with Brandon, he is the eye, right? He is the strategist. I don't need to be out on social media looking at anybody, because he is going to see it for me with the objective eye, and he's gonna say, okay, here's what's coming, here's what we got to do. Here's like our competitive necessities, along with the small pieces of advice that we've been given from the judges. It's doable. And I like that about him, because like I don't have to decipher like oh man, they look so much better than me, because of course these are the women I'm idolizing, right? So I'm still looking up to these women, like that's what I want to be. So instead of me like looking at other people, especially in competition shape, and thinking, wow, and in that lighting, and in that tan and that suit, man, I just don't have the right rear delts, and oh gosh, I'm gonna have to work on all this stuff. And he's like, nope, this, and this, and that's gonna change your physique perfectly, because he's just got it in the crosshairs.
Yeah, so you just lock into that and go and do your part.
Yeah.
And with when you take the training and the nutrition and you kind of put that all together, and then you put in the aesthetics, basically all of bodybuilding, what's been the hardest part for you?
As far as putting it all together?
Because let's put it this way, some people just love training, so that's never going to be an issue, right? Well, if somebody's honest, yes, it is. I mean, you're not going to love going to the gym every single day, but you're going to figure out how to regulate it.
Yeah.
And take off when you're supposed to. And this is a hard concept for people to understand unless they've gone through it. Like you said earlier, some days you're just going to back down because it's going to fuck your recovery up, and it's just spiral. It becomes an issue. But somebody just getting into it hasn't figured that out yet, because they haven't suffered the consequences of what happens. After you do that several times, you're not going to do it again, right? It's not going to happen, but they're still putting all those pieces together, right? Because independently, it's not going to flow. It's not going to work. And so putting those pieces together, what have been the tools that allow you to do that? Because you have a routine that flows too. So there's an artistic side, to what you do, which is a whole other area. Yeah. Which a lot of people don't spend
nearly enough time on
anytime doing that, but it's still time consuming in another area.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But it's also another component that has to fit in with the time management, the training, and all this other kind of stuff. So it's the discipline, I guess, is what I'm asking about. Is how do you pull that all together? Yeah.
I mean, I'm still fascinated by the psychology of all of this. And, your body has so many systems to protect you from pain, to stop you from being in pain. So being able to push yourself through not just training workouts, but through sacrifice of the time and the things that you want to do. And also even just in the small 10 minutes a day where you just really need some time to yourself, or you just want to kind of zone out, and it's like you just don't have that time. Like accepting that you are handing yourself over to this project completely and fully, and that every hour of the day in bodybuilding matters. It is a 24-hour-a-day sport. It can be 365. Of course you've got your days, of course, but like really allowing myself to see this as a whole, and that every piece of this is for the greater good, because you will kind of justify that this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. A couple more minutes here, or a few less of this, it's not going to matter. It does matter. So like how you put things together, that you showed up that day, your attitude, constantly honing your attitude, like constantly in a state of, like letting go of like maybe what you wanted to do or how you wanted it to turn out. Because like we do hold such high standards for ourselves, and you're not really sure what your ultimate shape is going to be, and being patient with that process. Also, just accepting that, you're going to make mistakes. Like I think that's like one of the hardest things I've integrated is like, I just don't see room for mistakes ever. And that just isn't life. That, and I don't think we really talk about it as enough, because like we are, you want to portray the best of the best and the top tier and what we all have to do. But at the same time, like you're gonna forget your food. Your alarm's not gonna go off, and if you hold that with you through the rest of your day or even your week, or if you miss something or something comes up, like it's gonna ruin the rest of your training and your mentality. And like people are gonna sense that on you, that like you haven't just let this thing go and like moved on to the next piece of your project, because there's always another meal, there's always another piece of training. Like maybe you can make it up, maybe you can fit it in, maybe you can't. If you cannot fit it in, you like forcing it sometimes is not gonna work. You're forcing it in just for the sake of forcing it in, when it's actually just going to kind of work backwards on you. But I remember saying to somebody once, I was like, we're only human. And she was like, that's it. It was one of my clients. He's like, we're only human. And I was like, gosh, she's right. Cause like we expect to be like these superhuman people doing superhuman things. And we are, but also there has to be, just a real acceptance of the flaws. And that really kind of does help shape you as well.
How do you balance that? Because if you accept the flaws too frequently, then you're just screwed up the whole thing.
And that is where you get mind fucked.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's where you're like, well, did I accept the wrong thing for myself? Did I let that slide when I really shouldn't have? And that's also a place where you can get really deeply stuck. And then you're just on this rotation wheel of like, well, this, and then that, and then those things, and all these things together. And I'm collecting all my mistakes from the week, and I'm putting them all in one place. And I just can't accept this many things. And, like you have to realize how much you have personal responsibility over, and if there really are more things than you can accept, then something's got to change with your process. Something's got to change with your planning, your people, or, like maybe you cannot do all of these things. Like you have over programmed for yourself, or you have over committed to, to too many projects, because like, of course we always want to say yes. Of course we can do this, we can that, we can do all the things. And it's just not physically possible. And that's where like a lot of people can just beat their head against the wall, because like, I should be able to do these things. And it's, you need to actually like really step back from how much you have agreed to. And then you see, okay, this is where the fracture was. This is why I had to stop and I couldn't finish, because I had this other thing, instead of actually putting, maybe even a more quality amount of training in that time, for example, than doing 10 exercises at 75%. I could have put that down to 6 really quality, thorough, excellent exercises and left, on a good note, and made it to the next thing. Because if you're overstressing yourself, with obnoxious amounts of work that like probably nobody else would even agree to, then that's a problem. Mm-hmm. But it's being honest with yourself. You're like, did I let that go? And can I accept the personal responsibility that I just didn't stack up for it, and where is that coming next in my program? I'm coming for it then.
How do you work with people to develop more personal responsibility? Because the default is to blame it on other factors. And in bodybuilding, actually in anything, you can't do that, right? Because everything ultimately is still your responsibility.
I remember explaining something to, I think Shane on the phone. Shane's on the phone. And instead of like responding to the thing that I was describing, he started telling me this story about, oh gosh, how did he phrase it? It was something like massive self accountability. And it had to do with, it was like a story he told me about maybe someone in the military. So instead of actually like talking to me about the thing, he got my mind on how this person took radical accountability. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. Radical accountability for the thing. And it took, after getting off the phone and thinking about it for a while, and I'm like, damn, like how do I, like make sure that I am always in accountability, not to the detriment where like you're the martyr, like it's all on me, but you are in charge of your schedule at the end of the day. Absolutely everything you can do, you can set up. You say yes, you say no. Maybe you need to say no more often, so it's like giving people the situation and the power instead of, this is the situation I'm in, and it's like, you can leave at any time. Here's your options. Just giving people options on how to go about something, a different point of view, because then it's like, well, then I can absolutely take on that responsibility, or, see this as mine instead of, their fault. Just kind of, and also you really have to live it, just kind of giving people your own personal experiences of like, I didn't get up in time. It's not that it's, it's just one of those things. So helping people like get to that realization is actually pretty satisfying, because it just changes their whole point of view on their training and sometimes life. So
would you say that it has to become your life?
To what?
To be at your level, right?
I mean,
well, actually,
yeah.
that's a weird question, right? Because you have to have that before you get to your level anyhow.
Well, there's some women that are, they're still working full-time jobs, have kids. I don't know how they do it. This is just how I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. This is just how I'm doing it. And, they'll have their jobs and their kids after this is all over. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I'm totally okay with that. That's how my whole life has been. I'm not going to change now. Mm-hmm. But for me, I really had to make those decisions early on, those really small decisions and a few really big ones, that this is what I wanted to do. And I'm constantly gearing those small decisions towards what I do. So for me, I don't think I could do it any other way.
How is, as we spoke earlier, using your demons to be able to propel you into this sport, how has that changed over the last decade? To where are you using it less and relying more on the discipline now? Or is it still just as hard or just as much? Because where I'll go with that is because you said, I don't know what I'll do after this, where this is how you're controlling all of that.
Oh, I want to be a lifter for life, competition, eventually bodybuilding, the Royal Bodybuilding will tell me when I'm done, or I'll know in my heart, and I'll be all right with that. I'll lift for the rest of my life. But as far as, I mean, if I am brutally honest, it's always there. It's always there. That's part of me. And sometimes I wish it wasn't so, because it would be, I could just kind of go on and do things without, quite having to struggle so hard with decision making. But I mean, but it's good at times to actually, speak with somebody like this about that, because it is so still just under the surface for me. So there is no, I mean, maybe it's been in hibernation once or twice, gave me a break, but it's, I mean, it's like, it's still in your blood, so when it's good to talk to other people. And I love listening to other people's stories about how they came up, what they did. I mean, there is not a day that goes by for me that I am not listening to someone else talk about the passion that they have for what they do in some way. And a lot of that comes from just real fucked up backgrounds. And I just hang on these words because, like, I love the raw admission of how bad it was, before they ascended and became who they are. Like, what they are is all of those things. And gosh, it took me, like I said, years to even acknowledge that was, because I just wanted to be a bodybuilder. I wanted to be, like, you're a figure of health, discipline, all this stuff. And but you know, like I've gotten older and I'm like, that's just not the whole story, man. Like that wouldn't be true to just say, yep, you know, this is great. You know, this is great. It's always been this way. No, it hasn't. And
it becomes your identity, right? So before you got into all this, you know, being a fuck up drug user, you know, whatever you want to call that time period, but that was your identity, right? And that identity was kind of wrapped around, you know, that internal mindset. But then you move into bodybuilding, that internal mindset's still there, but the identity changes, you know, to where you're able to use it for that, to where before you're able to use it for whatever you wanted to be able to party longer, or you know, whatever it was going to be. And the problem becomes when the bodybuilding's over, then that's part of your identity, but the values, or that's the wrong word, the embracing yourself is still there.
Yes.
You know, and
I think that's permanent.
It's permanent.
That has been, that is why I am so loyal to bodybuilding and my fitness sports in general, because I was loyal to it and now it is loyal to me.
Yeah, but you understand why it is, right? To where the people that have the identity crisis after the sport is done with them, which is normally how it ends. You know, it's I
mean, I'm going to go through that. I'm sure that, you know, you can be as cool with it as possible, but then, you know, I mean, and of course I'm listening to you guys, like you're ahead of me, and you've had to make decisions about what we're doing now, you know, and I'm going to have to make those decisions. And I have no idea how I'm going to handle it.
It's different for you because you've already identified it. You know, you've already identified the beast you need to feed, right?
Yes.
And so then when it's over, you just got to find a different way to feed that. You know, it could be training or whatever it's going to be, but you've already identified, you know, what that's going to be, you know, but being able to identify that, I think is critical and crucial, as long as it doesn't destroy your intimate relationships with the husband or people close to you.
Yeah.
Because that can drive you, and it can drive you harder than anybody else that doesn't have that.
Sometimes when you're done, you have so few ties and responsibilities that you fall in love with it all over again. And I think that's probably what's going to happen with me, is like, at least that's a feeling I get, that, you know, when competition, when I do my last competition, that it will be like a whole new phase of lifting where, you know, the time frame, maybe I'm sure at times you'll miss the time frames and whatnot. You can always do a mini cut or whatever, but like the fact that you have to, you know, is gone. You know, like I still do this because I love it. I swore to myself, if competitions ever came between me and my love for training, I would quit. And so far that has not been the case. But I promised myself that early on. But, you know, towards when the end, you know, for competition comes, I'm just hoping that it's like a whole new phase, you know. It doesn't really.
I'm always intrigued with this whole all-in mentality, because a lot of people don't ever experience it, you know, so it makes it something I'm kind of infatuated with. But at the same time, throughout, you know, 2 decades of doing this, what you thought was all in 10 years ago is completely different than what you think is all in now. Right. And it's an interesting thing, because a lot of times what you have to do coming up is the complete opposite of what you have to do to excel later. Right. Volume and training kind of can be one of those things where you're younger, you can get away with just doing stupid shit all the time. When you're older, not so much, kind of a little bit different. Nutrition may not matter that much when you're starting, as long as you're covering your macros. It just, you know, it completely matters on the other end of that whole thing. And so then you can look back and say, man, I thought I was all in, but nah. I wasn't. I was just all in on the shit I wanted to be all in on.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, not the stuff I wanted. So how is that manifested for yourself over the years?
Okay. That's a great question. I mean, the severity of all in, you know, I mean, I'm glad that I have been able to kind of take the steps that I have and just, chose the competitions that I did and came up the way that I did, because it really did prepare me for, the next high push. Um, but as far as all in now, like, you really have to be able to wrap your head around that pressure every single day, and kind of let it go as well, because like this day matters, this meal matters, this trip matters. How you going to plan around, how are you going to plan around that? The minutia is where people kind of get lost, and I've seen, I mean, you see grown men break under this shit every day.
Well, bodybuilding does break people every day.
And that is something to be remembered, I think, because, once you get there, you think you'll be fine. And then you're like, well, they just didn't have it. They just didn't hack it, or they did this wrong. And I won't make that mistake, but you just don't know until you get there what that pressure is going to mean like for you. You need a good circle. You need supportive people that remember you for who you are, but also know that, like, now I'm not just Angie. Like, I'm a 2-time Olympia silver medalist, and there's things that I have to do, and like, just the family that I have that have never doubted me once, never said I did anything too big. That really does help with the daily pressure of, like, making sure you don't miss those meals, make sure you don't miss that training. Time frames are like usually my most overwhelming thing, because everything's planned out to the half an hour. And if you miss something by 15 minutes, you can have a whole neurotic episode because you can't get that time back. You cannot get that time back. And when you're all in, that time is it's your most precious commodity, is to be able to work in the time that you have and have everything just flow right. That's where really where all the progress is.
So where do you fit your hobbies in?
Oh, in between, sometimes on the way. I really like to visit historical cemeteries, and my husband and I are into collecting the strange and unusual. So our home is filled with skulls, bones, antique medical equipment, very sharp things, very dead things, old things, some funerary, religious artifacts. And that is like our main thing, is we like to go collect weird stuff.
Have you tried to process as to why you like that?
Oh, just been morbid for life. Mm-hmm. Just morbid curiosities, and like, morbid from like from the mind that I couldn't escape, morbid from, the horrible things that I've seen. But now it's like in a controlled environment, and these things hold such interest to me, and the aesthetic is just so severe, so like having those things around, I don't know, it really makes for a beautiful home. But also that's like our thing that we do together. And we're currently looking at a 1963 Cadillac hearse that we might add to our collection. So that's something that we're thinking about, but it just brings us joy.
Do you think that's an infatuation with death, or a reminder to live?
A reminder to live. Absolutely. When I'm out in these cemeteries, like, no two are the same. And they'll never be the same in any specific, any season to season. They're always changing. So it's not just you're not just there, like, you're out in nature and you're out with people's family members. Like, this is, these places are quiet. They're meant for reflection, and that's what you do. Like, this is.
So what would be your reflection as you're there?
It's just the most, I can't explain it. There's like a coimetromania feeling where you're just at peace, and I can't really explain that. I don't really mean to be that way. Like, it's not like, oh, goth, I should go. No, it's, it just is. Like, and just being able to kind of like take that breath, and like, meditation is a huge part of my life. being able, to slow the breath, slow the mind, and let those thoughts of what your inner voice needs to tell you come up is such a valuable time that people just don't really.
How have you built that skill? Because that doesn't happen on day one.
I had to. I was not going to be able to survive without that ability to calm myself through through episodes, or from when I was a kid, like calming down from, like being, up for days at a time, just not being able to sleep, or being, distracted by just terrible thoughts. If you don't find a way to, like, I wanted to be able to find a way to be in a state of peace, even if I could not control what was going on. So
what was the desire to continue to do that after you first started? Because when you first started, you can try to do that and it's not going to work because you're stuck in your own hell.
Yes. Oh, that is a very good way of putting it. And then when you try to quiet, it's almost like things get louder there for a second and people turn away.
Yeah.
Because that's absolutely not what they want to do. They don't want to hear it louder. They're trying to get the fuck away from it. Or the memories of the things that they've done or been through, or, people they've hurt, or just any kind of terrible scenario. It is practice. It's intention. It's constantly, for me, it was learning and reading, and just over and over, like reading different strategies. So I had to fill my head with the ways to do it and the people who were very skilled at it to even really begin to, and that was part of the meditation itself, was just studying it. Because at least then, while I'm reading, like nothing else is really going on, and I can at least have a chance to put some good stuff in.
Is reframing a big part of this? Because I would see that as the Olympia with your cat. You found a way to reframe that.
Oh, yeah.
In a quick,
you've got to be a master at that.
Quick period of time to be able to get through that. But I don't know if reframing is as good of a word as just seeing it in its totality. Because you can see one end of it.
Yeah.
Cat's dying, you feel like shit. And then it's hard to see the other end, better place.
Yeah.
And
you are.
So I guess the question is, do you have to stop and question yourself a lot and reframe?
Yes. Yeah. I do try to take a look at my thoughts and see if they're real. Like learning about your own.
Pause there for a minute, because how do you do that? Like, look at your own thoughts.
You're like, what did I just say to myself? What was I just thinking? That's not what they really meant. Or like, did they really mean that? Did I really mean that? Why am I thinking this way? This is going to be so hard. Like, how am I ever going to accomplish this? Like, there's no time. I fucked this up. I fucked this up so bad. Like, I can't get over it. And it's like, you got to zoom out. Because like that's the role. Like some point you've got to hit brakes, because like those are the thoughts that will just carry you away into absolute madness, and you can be there. You can be there for a while, and it can ruin your day. It can ruin your afternoon. It can ruin, your whole week, or even an entire prep. And and that's what I love about powerlifters, bodybuilders, and these extreme sports athletes, because they have to harness that part of their mind to get this shit done. And that is absolutely what I see in like extreme sports, and like flow state. And learning about that was very powerful, because now I know like that exists, and I had felt it. I knew what that felt like, and I can practice my way to it. So, and this is, what's been going on in spirituality for, and meditation for thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever, so these are set in stone practices in humans that have been working. I need to tap into that.
Staying on that topic, because if somebody else is asking you, how do I do that? Right? Because we basically just said, just keep practicing, right? But you have to kind of have faith that the practice is going to pay out. With all that. So what advice do you give them if they're just trying to start doing this?
Okay. You really have to want to do it. you know, like just having a casual interest. I mean, it's good to know that it exists as, you know, a tool, but unless you really invest your time in it, your returns aren't going to be great because it does take so much practice. So hopefully the person is coming from a deep sincerity of like wanting to know how to do this for themselves, you know, because they can feel within them that this is something that they need to do, and it's going to help them. So I mean, like, that's kind of where it starts, is like you really have to ask yourself if you really want to do this, because it's going to be, you know, it's going to be time consuming, and it's going to probably be frustrating, and you might unearth some things about yourself that you might not have been ready for, because it really is, you know, going within. So I would just say for them to be prepared for that. And if they are ready for that trip, you know, that it really is a personal trip. I can't teach you where, I can tell you where to go or who the best person to go to is, like, you know, like a per se or a YouTube video, you know, like you might want to find that trail for yourself, because it's going to be custom formed to you if you do it that way.
Well, if they're finding validation in their own misery, you see what I'm saying? They may not want to, right?
That's deep.
Because it's easier just to live in hell, because that's what you're used to.
And nothing's my fault.
Yes.
And nothing's going to change. And
so the question would be, do you think they have to hit bottom, or their bottom? Right? Because everybody's bottom is going to be different. Like, some people's bottom could just be a bad day, right? It's, you know, your definition of the hardest thing you've ever done is only the hardest thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
You know, somebody else's can be completely different. And on another level, it can just be something very minimal.
I would hope they would start before they hit bottom.
Yeah.
You definitely do not have to be at a bottom, or even in a really bad place to start this practice. And in fact, if you're even just having a pretty good year, you know, including these things is going to help for when you do have a rough time.
Yeah. I would say waiting for it's worse.
Well, but then, I mean, you know, if you're at the bottom and you are truly seeking from a place, I mean, you're going to have the bond with it is going to be completely different. I'm not saying that either one is right or wrong, because that is not a judgment.
No, everybody's path is different.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're doing good, I would recommend these kind of mental techniques for anybody, because you just don't know when you're going to need them, and better to have them before you need them. But if you've never built them, and you know, you've kind of just, you know, lived under yourself, and not well, how is it that you said it, like living in your own misery. If you know, everybody kind of evolves at a different rate, but you're gonna mature at some point. You're gonna mature, and this is like a really great way to help you do that.
So to circle back to the first statement you made, bodybuilding is how I find out who I am. How does that manifest with you now? Because when I asked before, it was before exploring your whole journey.
Oh gosh, how does it manifest now? I mean,
because it was a recent statement. It wasn't that long ago, you know, that you made this.
I did say it a long time ago too. I mean, because that was when I was first coming up. I was like, this is it. But how is it now? That's a good question. I mean, it's still true. You know, I mean, I certainly have not reached the width or the breadth of who I am and what I'm capable of. Not even by far. And that's something that upsets me is that I have, and that's also what keeps me going, is that I have not yet reached my full potential. I have nowhere near reached it. A little frustrating, but also like it is both
well, how will you know when you have?
Because I think I would be closer to that, like, I don't want to say retirement, but just the knowing. I think I would be like, this is the best I can do. And I will have known that I think it would probably be with me for about a year or more, where I'm like, this is the best I can do. Because at some point, we're all going to lift the heaviest weight we've ever lifted, or be the biggest we can possibly get. I don't know where that is for me, but I know that I'm not there yet. Cause I, you know, in yourself, like with the mistakes that you've made, or, you know, what you haven't applied or tried, or, you know, where you weren't mentally strong, where I wasn't mentally strong enough to do all the things. And until I'm not looking for a perfect year.
Well, that's what I was going to go to. Is there ever going to be a show that even if you win, if it's the Olympia and you win that, and you're going to look back and say, I did everything right?
If there's a few points in my life I'm still working on, and I think with those, you know, worked on a little bit more, I mean, I could definitely say, you know, that was really, really close to as much as I could do.
What are those points?
I'm not gonna say.
Well,
I know.
You said a few, right?
Know.
So I gave you, there's 3 options.
Yeah. So there's like 2. But yeah.
Or you don't need to say what it is, but how are you going to work towards it?
It's a not doing. You know, so like, and then that actually creates more space for training. So one of my things that I'm working on right now, I actually got a fucking therapist for this year because I really wanted to be like a sports psychologist who has worked with other performance athletes, because I want to know more. If I can't imagine why people aren't curious about themselves, because this is the driver, this is a tool, this is in control of everything. So if you don't want to know more about you, you're probably not going to execute at your best, right? So having him help identify some of the things that are holding me back, like just so for one, like just getting more control of my OCD. I know it sounds really predictable, but it really, really, some of the negative sides on that are really destructive to me. And, you know, impulsivity, like those 2 things which go hand in hand. Having a better grasp on that now that I've like fully accepted that not only is that me, it's always been me, but now like I have a professional that is like, I've been doing this for how many years? Like, you're a clear-cut case, you know, now we can really get to work instead of just like wondering if like what the hell is wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be 40 in a couple weeks, you know, so this is a lifelong, you know, thing, you know, so like getting that time back from these, you know, impulsive actions and things that I do is gonna, and just the way that I do them is really gonna lend itself to my athleticism in a major way. Plus my, you know, stress levels being low.
But couldn't you say at the same time those are the things that helped get you where you are? And isn't that a mind fuck?
Oh, it absolutely is. Because there is a bit of superpower to it and the obsession of it. But also, again, just like when I was a kid, like I you know, I have all of this energy. I still have more energy that I can point in the right direction, where I could be, or even in my I could be coaching more. You know, I could be getting back to all of these other projects, and there's so many projects that I want to do, and I have these mental hurdles before I do them, even the ones that I want to do just for me. They're not even, it's not like a financial or a competition. It's like, I just want to do these things, you know, like that's what I want in my life. You know, I could be a lot farther on that if I get this figured out. So that in a case, but you know, you do try to, you know, keep the good, the good sides of it to still work for you. But I still feel like I have like a lightning bolt of all of these things that I could probably still, you know, hone down. It's always going to be wild.
Where do you see the biggest mistakes bodybuilders are making that are intermediate?
If they're intermediate, well, they've probably been training for 4 or 5 years. They've probably gone through a couple of programs. They've probably worked on their consistency and their nutrition. I would still say nutrition is like a big one. I think that's always going to be one of the easiest things to ignore. As an intermediate, I mean, you're probably in a certain age range as well. So you might have, you know, like other bits of life that kind of encroach in, or you're just not in the right atmosphere. So intermediate, if you're looking to get to, you know, above intermediate or even close to professional or elite, your environment absolutely matters. So if you are, not training in the right gym, or you need equipment. Like, this is a big ask. But can you switch gyms? Can you move? Like, how important is this to you? I mean, I know I'm starting off with some pretty big swings, but for me, the atmosphere changed absolutely everything. Being around people that have done this for, 15 years, and they were doing it together. So they're already an established crew, and learning from them, even though we all train different styles and different ways. Getting those eyes on me every week, change, and having, like proper spotting, like actually getting the load correct. Like, that was kind of big. That was big for me. So yeah, I would say nutrition's always going to be big, but if you have not actually curated your environment, that's a big place you can start.
Yeah, I would say that's a big one, because not just with the training and the nutrition and all that stuff, but it's just on people seeing you each week, they can tell where you're at.
Oh man, I had someone tell me to stop the other day.
Like where your headspace is.
Yeah. They're like, we've never seen you do this. And I would have probably pushed through, even though I knew I was in a lot of pain. Probably shouldn't have been doing it, but you're like, maybe the next one will be better. Is it ever really better? But you're like, let me try another one. Like, I'm not sure why this is happening. But then you've got a teammate that's like, this ain't you. This ain't you. Stop. And like, wow. Has anyone ever told you to stop?
Well, that's one of those.
When you've got someone that actually cares about you.
Yeah. See, that's one of those things that changes over your career. Like, in the beginning, you need somebody to kick you in the ass to train harder. Towards the back end, you have people that are like, shut it down. So it's the opposite. Of how that plays out.
Especially when you're working with heavy weight.
Yeah. Because
if you have a good team that has your best interest in mind, and they do care if you blow your shoulder off, they do care about your hips. They expect the highest level out of you. They expect you to give it 100%, but they are also going to be just as aware of how you act, how you operate, and tell you to save it for next week. You got your 5-pound PR, save it for next week. Because there's always that back and forth talk, especially in powerlifting, where it's like, we're going all out. Also, we got our 5 pounds. So it is a real dance of restraint at times. And you do need other minds around you that, can see how you've been benching, how you've been squatting, and, help you either pick another weight. If you're not sure, they saw how fast the bar moved. You're under the bar. Your perception is completely different, so yeah, but that stop is probably something that you just won't hear very often, because you're just supposed to go until something breaks off, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're probably gonna try that a few times, but the times that's worth it.
So then how do you manage training around through injuries when they come up?
I am really lucky that I've only had a few significant ones. The worst one I ever had was in my neck. And it is not a great story. I was putting my belt on and I felt something just shift. I know.
This is normally how it happens, though.
Yes. And it was... And I was just like, whoa, what was that? And then but I was benching. So I got under the bar, and I mean, I was able to bench, and I was able to bench all through the injury. I had to have somebody hand off for me every time. Every time. But it was the most pain I've ever been in. And that took some significant work around, because I couldn't really go overhead. I couldn't do a lot of pulling from the ground. That was one of those full stop things where you're going to do everything that you can do, and anything that irritates it, even sometimes just driving to the gym was brutal, until it just kind of finally, settled down. And I'm really glad that it kind of healed on its own, and I didn't really have to do any interventions with it. Took about 2 or 3 months, which was, I know I should have probably asked somebody, but of course, like, like I'm really not used to asking for help, and a lot of people aren't. But wait, no, I did. I think I did go in for a little bit of chiropractic in my neck, and I would have like some stim. And that was like the first time I'd ever actually gone in for some help. So I redact what I said about not asking. But it did resolve, and those are just tough. But now, like with the glute that I've had going on, still I don't really know how that one came up. It just started aching and getting real tight, and it just stayed that way. So I mean, of course we know that blood is your oxygen, your nutrients. So we do want to keep, some kind of pump. We want to keep, that blood flow going to the area for, the best healing results as fast as you can. But you literally have to kind of test it every week to see how it's doing. I was getting some massage therapy at the same time, and I had just gotten in with this person to do some deep tissue work, and she's very good at what she does. She's got like 20 years of experience. She's like 75. Laurel, you're awesome. But she was teaching me, about what she was feeling, because I hadn't really had a massage therapist that was quite as like all in on her craft as she was. In a minute anyway. So she, was like telling me what she was feeling and what she thought, and and it was kind of like, like balancing out hips and whatnot. But, she finally did give me the all clear, and it was a little bit before I thought I was healed, but she was correct. You just do what you can. You find stuff that doesn't hurt, or you're within a few degrees of what hurts, a percentage of what hurts. Because not moving that is probably not an option, and just staying static isn't my route to healing.
So your default is to train through it or train around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of train through, but that's really got to be you've got to be extremely careful with that, because if you want to, making it worse is going to set you back so far, and you don't even realize it until you actually do it sometimes, because you think you'll be fine because it's only a little bit, but
Has that changed how you approach the powerlifting side over the past couple of years?
Oh yeah. I mean, to be able to withstand these weights, you really need to be at your best. And because I haven't been on the platform since 21, I luckily do have, of course, I mean, I can't, my coach would shoot me.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I have. Don't shoot me, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
I have been on the platform. But, I mean, luckily, if I am not up for a 1 rep max or 2, I don't have to take it, and you'd be surprised how many people are like, rest it, take, because everybody who's like, we know, we've been there. Like we want you to take that downtime when you can. And I'm really, I'm glad to be around the people that I am, because they, they do look out for me and my bodybuilding. They're not like, well, you got to do all this for powerlifting too. No, it's like they see where I'm going and how far I've gone. Like they literally watched me like come up in this whole thing. So if I'm saying I'm just doing accessories that day, like, I'm not questioned. And you probably shouldn't, question people if they know what they need to do that day.
So if you're 8 weeks out now, have you started to peel that back some?
No. I mean, I will always, modify if needed. But I've been doing a lot of like reps, for max effort day. I don't really do a whole lot of singles right now. I'm much more into like 2s, 3s, 5s, or AMRAP, just depending on how good it feels and where we are in the day, because I do have to go to another gym. So there's some time management. So as much as I would like to, take all the time for a single and have everybody, like come and help me with that, again, like there is a bigger picture. So if I only have an hour to get this first lift in, there's an hour for accessories, and then it's off to the next place. Because if I'm creeping too far into the day, that gets into my sleep and that gets into the rest of it. You know what I'm saying? There, that half an hour, everything down to the half an hour schedule gets interrupted. So
when you say off to the next place, you're training more than once a day?
Well, I've just got some cardio afterwards that we don't have at the gym. So I go to the gym close to my house.
Were there any topics that you wanted to discuss I didn't bring up?
Well, I mean, I've just been wanting to sit down and talk with you for like so long. And I mean, what do you think of how I've done? We're both from kind of like the same area, and you know how I do what I do. I mean, from what I've explained at least so far, like, would you have any advice for me on how I do what I do?
Keep doing what you're doing. You know, it's
I do love it.
Your symmetry and the shape is what is separating you, you know, from everybody else. And you've somehow or another fucking managed to maintain that, even with all the heavier shit, you know, which is, you already know this. I mean, that's what you need to lean into, right? And not away from that, you know. And the powerlifting thing is the powerlifting thing. It's like a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
Like, you got to learn how to manage it, because it's not really going to make you a better bodybuilder at this point, but it is satisfying other things. You know,
And that
like,
makes me.
that makes you,
sometimes,
right?
yeah.
Because
Is that part of the secret sauce?
I
And
think
that's where you
so.
can get kind of, you're like, is it part of the secret sauce or should I not? You
Because
know, yeah.
on those sets, you have to go to a different place than you'd have to go to on your other stuff, right? And then that's kind of satisfying that need, you know, for that, to where if it's pulled away and that need's not satisfied, is it going to manifest in some fucked up other way, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's like the double-edged sword, where that kind of separates like a true meathead from a not true meathead. Is like you got to walk that line really carefully, but some can't take it out, right? Because if they take it out, then meals get fucked. Other things get fucked up, because it's satisfying something, you know, and it's also building the density and stuff like that, where you just keep doing what you're doing, you know, and figure out how to use that. The coolest part of your story is you've figured out, and I don't want to say you figured out your personality or your spirit or whatever we want to call it, right? And I think some people try to change that. I don't think we can. Maybe we can, maybe, but it's going to take some radically fucked up shit because it's like your DNA. Like, but when you figure out how to use it to your advantage, then anything's possible. You know, it's when you start questioning that, like, I shouldn't be this, right? Then you start being who you're not, instead of taking who you are and making the best out of it, you know. And that's where I see a lot of people fuck up, right?
They're not being authentic, and it's
no, they're trying to be somebody else.
Yeah.
Maybe because they're looking up to somebody else. They want to be like that other person. So then they think they need to take on the personality of that other person. And all of it's fake anyhow, because they don't really know the person, right? So they're trying to emulate a role model that's being portrayed falsely. You know, don't worship false idols. You know, it's, you know, that's kind of what happens in there, instead of just figuring out that it's who they are.
Yeah.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with that.
If there is anything, you know, that people can take from this, is like, yeah, you know, you might be pretty fucked up.
Is it though?
You might be, but like, that's not all there is to you.
Yeah.
Not only is that not all there is to you, like whatever has happened to you and like the stuff that you've been through, like, you can absolutely like channel this into something like and it can like, this is my body. It's like, you know, is not necessarily an external piece of art. I mean, it could be for you if you want it to be, but I put it all back into me. Yeah, exactly. You know, and there's like, that's not all there is to you. You know, like, no matter like how bad off you feel, or like the stuff that you've seen, like, that's not the end. Like, I promise you.
Well, the other part of that too is it's not going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you can,
yes,
you know, you can pretend like it will, but it won't. And it's a hard thing, you know, to be able to balance what that is. And some people's default is just violence, you know, or anger or whatever it's going to be. You wake up every morning pissed off, like whatever.
Yeah.
Stop. You know, not be. Other people, you know, on the other side,
but saying just stop. it
Yeah.
never works like that.
Well,
Like,
there's on the other
yeah.
side of that, we're forgetting about the people that just wake up and they're just statically happy all the time, right? They're obnoxious as hell too. And they're probably going through the same type of shit because it's not a balanced type of thing, you know, and they're not getting what they want out of life because it's too optimistic. You got to live this, you know, between like reality and enabler. Like
Yeah.
I've always said, I want to have people that are enablers, so they'll enable all the stupid shit that I want, but then also a realist, you know, so to kind of help balance that.
Yes.
With that, otherwise all you do is stupid shit, and that's not going to get you anywhere either. Where it can be who you are, but it's not manifesting in a productive way.
Yeah. Your closest people need to be there and pushing you and helping you. Like no one can do the work for you, and no one has really done the work for me, but some people have cleared the path for me.
Yeah.
You know, just made it just a little bit easier for me to go and do what I do, or, you know, just helped in a way where I was a little bit more free to do what I needed to do. And that's the best case scenario, is that you've got, you know, your family and your friends that absolutely believe in you. And like sometimes you do have to earn that. I had to earn that back, you know, like because there was a real clear route to just being a statistic, and I mean somehow beat a lot of odds, and you know, like and not just like proving to them, but like to myself, and like, you know, you got to live with you and like you said, it's never going away. You got to live with those memories sometimes every day, you know, but still be able to kind of just let them pass through you and bring yourself back to the present state of like, what am I about to do next? Because like today really matters. And
well, I think throughout your journey too, you found gratitude.
Yes.
You know, and you know, that's a tough one, you know, for somebody that lives in this other world, because it's the last thing you think about, because the world's just fucked up and everything's fucked up. And then gratitude feels fake, you know, but when you have real gratitude, you know, you win a show, but yet you feel great for the people that were there, you know. So a large part of why you're still doing some of this is because of other people, you know. So it's still you, but that's not your whole drive.
Yeah, I've brought that with me,
you know.
Yeah.
So it's their drive. You feel accountable, you know, and responsible.
When I bring these things back, like that is like one of the greatest joys of all of this, is like when I brought that medal home. Yeah, I brought it to my mom and dad, but I, you know, bringing it to Main Street, I was like, this is my contribution. You know, like this is like the caliber of athlete that we have here. Cause I, you know, like just me being able to, it's just super special, you know, like you're the one that's bringing back, you know, the elevation. If I come up, we all come up. And I love that. Like if I can do better, we're all doing better. And like, then you have like absolute proof that you're like, these are the people that I train with. Not only are they, you know, world record holders and like amazing in their own right, but like here I am bringing this whole new, you know, facet to the gym, and, you know, being the top 2 in the world, like times 2. So it's just,
well, it's hard to find. It's hard to find that in strength sports, because strength sports, you know, introverts are gravitated towards that, you know, for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just you and it's all on you, and you're like, fuck it, I don't want to deal with it. Hey guys, if you like and want to support the podcast, remember we have limited edition items. These items can range anywhere from t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, cups. You never know what you're going to get. Check them out at www.elitefts.com. Other people.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a plague that can happen if you don't deal with other people, because then you're perpetually just living in your own head.
Speaking of your own head, so here's a question. Since you've been in these incredibly high caliber athletic situations, I really would love to hear from you how you handled the pressure of being, among the best with the best, doing the things that the best do, and like how you approached those competitions. Like I know that I know what I've got to do physically, but like mentally, I think is like I always have room to grow there, and that really is the last frontier for me.
Well, I think that I don't know if I ever did maximize the potential there, right? Because there's always that feeling that you don't belong, right?
Well,
Because if you never belonged anywhere else your whole entire life, that's kind of like an ingrained thing, going back to that dark shit that's always in there. It's always there, but then you got
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, but then you got to convince that you do, and then come to the realization that what you have control of and what you don't have control of. Like I can't control what somebody else is going to lift on a given day.
Yeah.
I can't control any of that. I can only control what I can do, what I can do to prepare for that. So that was the shift, at least that I see amongst everybody, by the way, that when they can get to that point to where they understand exactly what they can control and not. And that's very easy to say, very hard to do.
When you made mistakes, how did you handle that with yourself?
Fuck it.
Like let it go?
Yeah.
All right.
Fuck it, let it go.
Okay. I think that's very valuable information.
Well,
people cannot let it go.
No, it
Sometimes
takes time.
you try and you just can't let it go because you're like, I don't have time for that mistake.
Yeah, and there's times you miss a weight, in the gym, and you're mad as fuck until the next week where you get to do it again, and it takes time you got to give yourself time to be pissed about it. It's not going to not be there. But if you fret about it, you're just going to screw up all your other training sessions. When I started to understand that my emotions also contributed to how I recover, things started to change. Right? Because if I'm pissed off all the time, cortisol's higher, I'm not recovering from the training that I need to. So then it's reframing, all these other things. Like, how can I reframe this? Like, what did I learn from this? Was I just fucking stupid? Like, if I was just stupid, fine. Okay. I'm allowed to be that sometimes. But I've been stupid for 4 weeks in a row. Like, this is now beyond that. Right.
Yeah. Where is the real issue?
This is now self-destruction. Like, why is that? Is it because I don't want to do well? Then that's the
why am I self-sabotaging somehow? There's some element in here that I'm holding myself back.
Yes. And those are the spending time alone, walking, just clear head space, or, reading. I think is a great thing, because if you're reading, even if, story, fiction, whatever it is, you have to focus and you're not thinking, the other stuff. So some kind of break, from all that. Business is the same way, because that shit can just consume you. And there's
exactly another 24-hour a day thing where all hours are work hours.
Yes.
No, that's a great thing. Is I don't know how you managed to get to the point where you can actually have time where you don't work, and how you ended it. Okay. So, all right. Cause I'm like, is it just me? I feel like I'm supposed to not work at sometimes. And sometimes you just don't work when you're not working.
Yeah.
And that's just the schedule that you have.
It just comes with the territory. But the key takeaway was, in any adversity that you're in the midst of, right? You're going to think, here's the worst case scenario, right? Here's the best case scenario. And you're going to spend, I'll use an example of the first lawsuit I ever had to go through, right? So you get hit with that. You're like, oh, fuck. Then I'm spending all my time doing discovery and research, which I shouldn't do. That's what the attorneys are supposed to do. And it's like, oh, fuck, this is going to put us out of business. And, or maybe, it would just blow away. And, so this plays out over a year period. And everything I thought was going to be the worst wasn't how it resolved. Everything I thought was going to be the best wasn't how it resolved. And it never is in any adversity that you're playing through your head, because there's fear, and then there's, optimism that are kind of playing. All you're doing is playing false narratives in your head over and over and over and over. And then when I looked back on that whole thing, it's like the only time I really should have thought about this should have been when I was speaking with the attorney. and then don't think about it, because everything, all the time I wasted worrying or hoping on all these different things was time that took away from productive work I could have done to drive the business forward. Where I had a mentor of mine at the very beginning of this that fucking told me, and it didn't, you got to go through some things sometimes, you know, to realize it. But a mentor told me at the very beginning of this to do exactly what I just said. Like, only think about it while you're speaking to the attorneys, because this situation will not put you out of business. But not doing all the things you're supposed to do to grow the business will 100% put you out of business. And then, you know, after all that, it was just like, oh, fuck, right? So then when you got to catch yourself. And I think you learn this over time. If you're having a sleepless night because whatever issue it is, you got to really stop and ask yourself, is this going to end up this way or this way? Probably not. Where are we at right now? Right.
And I'm okay right now. I'm actually okay right in this moment. It's not a crisis right this moment, or it's not even it's not a right now problem.
Yeah. It may not ever be a crisis.
Yeah.
But you can sit there and think it's going to be for days.
Genuinely a gem where you're like, the time that you lost worrying about it was time that you could have been putting towards it. And I know people probably heard that in many different ways, but it is such a good reminder, because we do it to ourselves all the time. All the time.
Unless you know how to stop, reframe, you know, or speak to somebody that's got a completely different perspective. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Like, speak to somebody that's not even in this fucking industry.
Get it out. Yeah.
You know, if it's a business issue, I'll speak to people that are not even close to this industry at all. And then I'm explaining the issue, and some of the times they're just laughing. Like, this is seriously
this is a problem.
Like, this is not a problem. Like, why?
Not a problem.
This is not a problem. Like, why do you think this is a problem? This is just normal shit.
That needs to be on a shirt. This is not
this is not a problem. Like, and other times it's like, this is a problem. And you're like, so,
that's a big problem.
But you don't know if you don't have different perspectives, you know, from different areas, you know, because the people that are in this world all kind of have this world's outlook.
They're all in the same
general.
Mix.
They're all in the same mix.
Yeah.
You know, where if you diversify that a little bit, you get people in a different mix, then you're able to make better educated decisions, because you're not living in this bubble, which is safe.
Yeah.
Which is where we all want to be.
Your view too, and you can then use that piece of advice from that one person on another problem, and you're like, man, you just like really solved a whole bunch of things just by talking to that one person that had no idea
exactly and
what you were doing.
And you may not be going deep enough. I mean, we see this all the time just with politics. I mean, people get upset because of talking points. Like, did you look at what the actual issue is?
Right. And what do you think about that?
Yeah. And
what do you actually think about that?
Forget the noise. What is that actual issue? And on each side, you know, and then figure out how you feel about all that. But so much time is wasted, you know, and all that false narrative bullshit where you can't, in business, you can't do that. You don't have that time to be able to waste, because there will be another problem tomorrow and the next day.
Absolutely. And then compounded issues.
You know, so you got to become,
that's when you shut down.
You got to become very quick at being able to pivot, you know, all those type of things. But all this comes from trying to figure out the training process. Just it's all the same thing. I mean, you can go in for a max effort day, and after your warm ups, you're like, man, this shit ain't gonna happen. You know? So then you gotta
being honest with yourself about that, and not being like, no, I'm just being a bitch today. No, this really isn't there.
Yeah.
And if I try, you know, like, and that's a tough one for people to really come across, to being like, you know, because, you know, if you are working with someone whose propensity it is to not train, it then actually really makes it difficult for you to figure out when they are actually in a position where they shouldn't.
Yep.
Because there, you know, if everything's a struggle, and you're not really excited about anything, but you're doing this because you have to, or because you're committed, whatever your reasons are, which are genuinely usually pretty deep reasons, but you're just, you know, struggling with the facts. That just becomes a kind of a quagmire to then decipher what's really a bad day. So you got to be honest with yourself about what a real bad day is. You know, maybe you actually haven't had that bad day yet, and you're just imagining that it's a bad day. And I hate to put things in, you know, like, it's all in your imagination, but like really, like, again, if you're not curious about your own mind, I don't know how far you can make it in these sports.
Not far.
No.
And I mean, if you're genetically inclined, yes.
Who is the most thoughtful lifter you ever worked with? Like that really kind of went into this stuff and, like was kind of like a lifer with.
Probably J.M. Blakely.
I was going to say.
It's at the same time, the most thoughtful ones never became the best ones they could be. Right? Because there's got to be a screw loose. Right? It's just being able to maintain that, because it's with training, you can have stretches of time, long stretches of time where you don't want to train at all, but you still have to do it. Right?
Oh, man. People forget that when you're really in this, having a good day, like actually is far harder to come across than it used to be. And you might train for months and not have a day where you got that one feeling that you felt when you first started, and you're like, that's why I do it. This is the feeling that I need, and like being able to train in between those times and just go and go and go and not have that reward is like, you want to prepare your lifters for that.
That's how these sports break people, right? Because they think that's always going to be there.
They think they're done or they're broken or something, and it's not true.
That's just not part of the process.
Oops.
What the hell is that?
That's my phone.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
No, that works. That's Scooby-Doo.
I have no idea.
So how would you take and summarize your career to this point?
Oh, man. I mean, I literally came from the back room of my house, from the dark to the biggest stages, like win after win. Like I still have a hard time even looking at my own track record and believing that is like what I have accomplished after these years. But if anything, it's been whatever I was put on this planet for. If this is like my next iteration in my next life, this is what I'm supposed to learn is everything through my body and my discipline and my mind. So to be able to, I have the opportunity now to literally, like when I got with my husband, I had nothing but like the clothes on my back, no car, no education, no job, nothing. And, now to be standing with the best in the world is something that I care so deeply about. And that now, like, really caring about myself and seeing my own potential has been, it's a life that I wish other people could have, because I have had such a unique experience. I wish people could feel some of the things that I have felt in my life, both the bad and the good, because the contrast is just, is just like a blowtorch of incredible, intensity.
Any final thoughts?
I just want to thank you. I thought I might have manifested this a couple years ago, but I was like, no, because I always thought, well, maybe I'll be good enough one day. And I was like, like when I won nationals, I was like, oh, I'm kind of a big deal. Not like, but I was a pussy. I was like, never going to call. And I was never going to, you never invite yourself anywhere. So, after these wins and all this work, to have this recognition, it's a really big deal to me. This is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. This is like, to me, it really is one of the biggest days in my life to be here.
Well, I didn't want to speak with you because you are, Miss Olympia runner-up. It's your story, right? You could have placed 20th, and it's still the story.
Thank you.
That matters more.
That's
than
awesome.
What that is, right?
Thank
because that story, that journey, that path, other people can relate to. They will hear, and inspire them to want to be better, because there's still a genetic component to all this. We're not going to sit here and lie about all that. It's still work. You're not saying you don't have to do the work. We all fucking know that. genetics are no guarantee.
Hey, my mom and dad are badasses.
You know, no guarantee whatsoever.
Yeah.
So not everybody's going to be able to aspire to become Miss Olympia or anything like that, but they can aspire to go through and figure out who they are.
Yes.
And then utilize it to their best advantage to whatever they want to do. That's a story that needs to be told. You know, that's a story that has to go out there.
Yes.
Plus, I'm infatuated with this all in shit. So I like people that are all in.
That's me.
You know, on different things because it changes over time and how it actually unfolds to what it really is. Right. Because it's so intriguing to me that when I thought I really was, I was nowhere close.
And what if I'm not anywhere close now?
You don't know.
Because like, okay, let's think about this. Let's think about this. If I place higher or lower this next year, my life changes. You know? So I mean, that's really where I'm what I'm on the precipice of right now. And I did so well at Rising Phoenix last year. And, you know, from within the grapevine, people, the things that they said about how well I did, you know, I should not repeat because I don't want to be in trouble, but it was, you know, like the reinforcement that I did extremely well at that show. And, you know, don't take your foot off the gas because you're going to do it.
If you place higher or lower, your life changes.
Yeah,
how?
A little bit. Well, it might not change as much if I place third, but it'll change significantly if I place first. You know, like I admire Andrea so much for her ability to represent this sport in a way that is so professional. She is Miss Olympia. She's got this down pat. You know, I mean, she travels all over the world for this. That's something I have never done. You know, the way that she gives back and she's just so good at it. And I admire that because like, I don't know if I have it in me yet to just, you know, fly to Europe by myself. Like these are huge personal growth pieces that I would need to achieve. So, and of course that's like the face of bodybuilding changes, you know, like and the incredible wave that comes with that. Like there would be a lot to get ready for. And say I place third, you know, and like what if that is like another piece of juice that I need to, you know, actually pull all the loose ends together and have a better year than ever. Like and that's the thing, like you never know how long you're going to be here. You know, I've had 2 years at top 2. It's incredible. I should be doing more with it. I really should be traveling more with it to represent, you know, women's bodybuilding because it is such a special type of athlete to be, and we are just badasses. Like it's all I've ever wanted to do. But yeah, I mean,
So a piece of your life
change.
Changes, right? Because you're still going to end up leaning on your elbow, eating food in the off season.
Well, some things never change.
Exactly. So the nomad part, the majority of the part really isn't going to change.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I guess, well, for me, and I have to be ready for all of these things. So, you know, like from the outside, your life doesn't change. Maybe my husband's life changes because wow, he's gonna, you know, that I have no idea what it's like to be married to somebody like myself. I know what it's like to deal with myself, but you know, like how do I like what kind of strength is it gonna take? Do I have that same strength that she does to do all these things and still train and it's a huge mantle to even think about. So we've got some really great girls that are coming up this season, and I am just excited for all of us. So, you know,
that's great. So how can people follow you? How can they find you? And then what sponsors do you want to promote?
Okay. Well, I'm on Instagram at IFBB _Pro _Yeo, YEO. I'm on Facebook with an athlete page for Anjie Yeo. My email is coach@proyeo.com. That is like one of the best business ways to get a hold of me. So if you have like a business request, you know, getting to me on Instagram might not be the best way. DMs are just kind of a little bit more than I can handle sometimes. But also my sponsors, Main Street Barbell, Kira Jones of Vandala Costumes has been suiting me since 2014, since my second year in competition. She is absolutely amazing. Like, I highly recommend someone like this because she hand sews everything. She hand stones everything. Nothing is outsourced to China. None of the work. She cuts it all herself. I'm super grateful to Mitt 45 and Uprising for taking me under their wing this year. Carly, thank you for drafting me onto the team. You guys have been just incredible. Their supplements are something that I use almost every single day, and I believe in them. I believe in them as a company. Also, my gym sponsors, Ironworks, Jekyll and Hyde Gym. Oh, who else? All of my sponsors are listed on my Instagram page. There's not really many. I've kept my circle pretty small. And trust is hard, and I've never really been a billboard for anybody. So I just appreciate all of these people taking a chance on me and treating me as well as they have. So
all right, well, thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Love sitting down talking to you, and maybe we'll do it again after you win.
I would love that.
So see how that all plays out.
Love that.
And so with that said, we're done. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, 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 or here for more videos.